The place was packed with customers, but the girl didn't pay any attention to anyone. She was in such a state that she didn't want to talk to anybody. She went straight to the bar, where there was a wide selection of drinks. Sitting at the bar, she immediately ordered the strongest alcohol they had to dull her pain. Eva Young wasn't in the best mood. Her life had gone through huge changes she wasn't prepared for. She remembered the recent events, how her beloved fiancé talked to her as if she were the lowest kind of scum. He harshly said how dare she come to him. Did she really think she could take shelter with him? He said he only got engaged to her because he thought it would link him to the Young family. Their lousy engagement had already been called off, so she should do him a big favor and never show him her disgusting face again, stressing how tired he was of her after all those years together. She kept asking herself why, but couldn't find an answer. Why did he do this? Why did he betray her? Up until that day, she'd been successful at work and had the person she loved, the man she was going to marry. But everything changed in an instant and shoved her into a dead end. Her successes at work went unrecognized, and her efforts were thankless. Her grandfather insisted she wasn't his legitimate granddaughter. He asked how could she be so ill-mannered as to burst into the conference hall like that. The girl couldn't understand how they could so easily push her out of the family. Hadn't she done everything a good granddaughter should? She didn't care about his cold attitude toward her. It was true, she really wasn't from the Young family. They never even considered her one of them. They told her she was just a pawn and that anyone could control her. Eva tried to convince herself to remember this. At last, she would do whatever she thought necessary to protect herself. She would make them pay for abandoning her and for treating her like a slave they could throw away whenever they felt like it. They'd used her to the fullest and tossed her aside when she was no longer useful. She wanted to make them regret it. She slammed her fist on the bar and wanted to punish every last one of them. The man next to her was curious how she planned to make them regret what they'd done. Did she have enough money and influence to destroy them all? Besides, it would take a lot of strength and determination to spend her time on them. At first, she hadn't thought about that. She even felt that not having those things wasn't a good enough reason to give up on revenge. The main thing was that she had a strong desire. She also had enough strength to stand up to her family. From all the alcohol in her system, she could barely stand, but she still tried to prove to the man that she was capable of great deeds to defend her dignity. The girl grabbed the man by his tie. She didn't want anyone to talk her out of the path she'd chosen, and she didn't need anyone to dissuade her from her plan for revenge. Of course, she had none of those resources right now, but she could do anything to find the means and methods to get her revenge. She would definitely find a way to make them all kneel, and she would force them to beg for mercy. She'd do whatever it takes to make them regret it, even if she had to sell her soul to the devil. The man had never seen her like this before, but he didn't fully believe her. Right now, alcohol and anger toward her abusers were what was speaking through her. Still, he gave her one piece of advice, to be more careful with her desires. The girl gathered her courage and, without her grandfather's permission, walked into the conference room, something she had never dared to do before. Her grandfather hadn't expected such a bold entrance from his granddaughter, so he was very surprised. All the company employees turned their attention to her, looking at her with judgment, considering her behavior improper and unworthy of the family. Her grandfather angrily addressed her, asking how she, Evangelina, ended up here and what she was doing. Eva pretended not to understand what her grandfather meant or why he was questioning her like this in front of everyone. She believed that she should be the one asking questions in this room. She was the CEO of this company, and he dared to ask what she was doing there. Her grandfather suggested Eva leave the place. They could talk at home. How could she be so ill-mannered as to barge into a work meeting so brazenly? The girl was completely confused, not understanding what was happening, so she came to get answers right here, right now. She wanted her grandfather to explain why he was dismissing her. For heaven's sake, she was the CEO. Her grandfather told Eva that, starting today, she was no longer the company's CEO. Listening to his explanation, she couldn't understand what had happened or why it was happening this way. Recently, the board of directors had already chosen her replacement, so she could clear out her office and leave the company. The new CEO would take over within the next few days. She couldn't understand why the board was searching for her replacement behind her back without informing her beforehand. The board members acted as if they weren't guilty of anything and avoided looking her in the eyes. Everyone stayed silent. No one wanted to answer uncomfortable questions. She asked her grandfather again if he was really telling her the truth and if he even stood behind his words. How dare he remove her from her position? She was the one who had lifted this company off its knees when it was on the verge of bankruptcy. She needed to find out immediately what was going on with him, and more importantly, why he had made such a decision. Her grandfather insisted Eva go home. They would talk about it later. She didn't want to do that. She didn't want anyone telling her what to do. She wanted to know everything right now, in front of the board of directors. She was furious. Her hands trembled badly from all the tension. At that point, her grandfather stopped speaking and didn't want to continue the dialogue with his granddaughter. He said explanations would come later, and the office was not the best place for it. Eva demanded answers from her grandfather immediately. She had no intention of leaving the office without learning the whole truth. He absolutely had to answer what the hell was going on in the company. She demanded answers right away. Her patience was at its limit. Her grandfather suddenly jumped out of his chair and shouted at the top of his lungs that this was happening because she wasn't his legitimate granddaughter. Evangelina was stunned. How could it be that she wasn't a legal member of the Young family? Was this some kind of joke just to shut her up? She turned to her grandfather, asking what he was even saying. That simply couldn't be true. Her grandfather explained that yesterday he had received a DNA test result showing she wasn't biologically related. He didn't know how it had happened, but they would investigate. Eva didn't believe his words and accused him of lying. Maybe it was a mistake or someone's stupid joke. Her grandfather planned to show her the DNA results later, and he was confident in their accuracy. He had done the test more than once. He was completely sure there was no mistake. She needed to go home and wait for him. So this is it. The end of everything, the girl raged. And all because she didn't have a single drop of his blood. Really? Over such a detail she couldn't hold her position in the company? Especially when she had done her job so well. Her grandfather didn't know what else to say, but he was certain Evangelina shouldn't be the CEO of the Young family company. What nonsense, she smiled bitterly. But the despair in her eyes was obvious. Her grandfather thought Eva needed to calm down. She would still work at the company, but only as one of the directors, helping her sister. She smiled ironically. Her little younger sister would take her place and manage the company just fine. Her grandfather understood Eva's state and didn't want to argue back. He simply didn't want her insulting her younger sister. When he wanted to say more, Eva didn't want to listen. She cut him off with a single gesture of her hand. She decided she had no right to call him grandfather anymore. From now on, she would address him as Mr. Young. She wanted Mr. Chairman to listen to her and draw some conclusions that would be useful not only for him but for the company as well. Evangelina suspected her grandfather knew the truth, that without her, the corporation would collapse into dust. He had better remember her words, because he would think of her again when it came time to pull the company back from the bottom. For now, Eva felt she had said all she needed to, and continuing the conversation was pointless. She decided to leave the conference room. Even though she was deeply hurt and angry at her grandfather, she still walked out with her head held high, refusing to lose her dignity. Going directly to the clinic, she wanted to verify her grandfather's words, so she decided to act on her own. With the papers finally in her hands, she was very nervous, but she needed to know the results of the lab tests. Opening the envelope, she saw for herself that the DNA test showed no match with the Young family. So that's the real reason they had always treated her like a robot, using her only for their own benefit. Since childhood, her parents and family had always been cold to her, and it hadn't gone unnoticed by others. Her grandmother, mother, and father all hated her. As a little girl, she hadn't understood much, but even then, she felt lonely. They never visited her and didn't even show up at school when the teachers called them in. They had been preparing her for survival in the harsh world she would inevitably face in the future. Yes, their coldness toward her was part of the preparation for her to become the head of the family business. Yes, they truly didn't want her to grow into a spoiled weakling who wouldn't be able to achieve anything in this world. Clutching the DNA test results in her hand, she finally realized she had been foolish all these years. They must have known from the very beginning that Eva wasn't their real daughter, and because of that, they never showed her a drop of care or love. They simply raised her because they knew that one day she would be very useful to them, as they could use her for their own purposes. And now, when she had become independent and managed to pull the company into a major profit, they saw her as a threat that had to be eliminated immediately, used and discarded like worn-out material. But that wasn't as horrible as the fact that they had hidden the whole truth from her. The girl sat in her car but didn't know where to go to get support from someone. She was very confused and wanted to hear advice from someone on what to do next. Eva decided to call her fiancé to warn him that she was coming over, but for some reason the man wasn't answering her call. She didn't see anything wrong with showing up unannounced, since this wasn't the first time. The girl drove very fast, trying to get an adrenaline rush to release at least some of the tension. Eva was already near her fiancé's house. After parking the car, she rushed quickly to his apartment. Waiting for the elevator, the girl thought she absolutely had to talk to him. Julian would definitely support her because, in her eyes, he was the only one who truly loved her. He was the only one who could help her. Together, they could overcome any obstacles in their way. Julian lived in a luxury skyscraper, very high up, so the girl had plenty of time riding the elevator to think about her problems. The girl was already on her way to her fiancé's apartment, eagerly anticipating their meeting. Eva was a frequent guest in his apartment, so knowing the lock code, she easily opened the door. When the door opened, she heard a peculiar noise inside her fiancé's apartment, so she carefully stepped in. She stood by the door and heard unfamiliar voices. The girl took off her shoes so her heels wouldn't make any noise. She was curious what was so important that her beloved hadn't answered her call, so she decided to carefully take a look. The sound was coming from the man's bedroom, so Eva headed straight there. She walked barefoot, so quietly that her fiancé couldn't possibly hear that someone else had unexpectedly entered his apartment. The girl stood before the bedroom door, unable to bring herself to open it. The voices didn't stop, and a woman's light laughter rang very clearly. She understood she had to do it, so she gathered her courage and pushed the door open. What she saw shocked her greatly. She couldn't imagine something like this could ever happen to her. It turned out that her fiancé was with another girl, who looked unusual. Eva couldn't utter a single word. She couldn't handle yet another unpleasant surprise in one day. As the girl stood nearby, the man finally noticed her, but his expression made it clear that Eva's presence didn't scare him at all. He even got very angry, asking what the hell she was doing in his apartment without warning him about her arrival. The girl didn't understand why he was treating her this way since during their last meeting, he had told her how much he loved her. The man was furious about her barging into his home so suddenly, saying he could have personal matters that had nothing to do with her. Eva felt as if she had just been doused with filth, disgraced in front of the whole city. Julian didn't want to see her, so he told the girl to leave his apartment immediately. Eva was stunned, unable to move, while her fiancé kept yelling at her to get out. The man behaved arrogantly, saying if she didn't leave now, he'd be forced to throw her out by the collar. Still, she wanted to know why he had done this to her. Had he been cheating on her all along? The man said their relationship was over. He had heard all the news that she wasn't really a member of the Young family. He considered her a nameless stray and couldn't believe she had dared to come to him. Why did she think she could find shelter with him? In reality, he had only gotten engaged to her because she was from the Young family. It was very advantageous for him. So he decided to break off their engagement, and from now on he didn't want to see her, considering her disgusting and vile. He said she had completely bored him. The girl tried to restrain herself, knowing she didn't have the right to cry. This man wasn't worth a single tear. She firmly decided she would not cry, never again. Better to die first. The girl pulled herself together, prepared for a final speech, and said that Julian would one day regret what he had done to her. The man noticed Eva's expression change. Anger burned in her eyes, and at that moment she was capable of anything. Then she looked once more at her rival, making sure she would remember her face. The pink-haired girl was very frightened, expecting a huge scandal or even a fight, but thankfully it didn't happen. Eva wanted Julian to listen carefully and remember her words for the rest of his life. She swore she would one day play a hand in his death, and that was her promise. With that decisive phrase, the girl chose to leave the scoundrel's apartment, deciding he wasn't worth a grand scandal. Julian said something after her, but Eva no longer cared. She headed straight for the exit. Then she left the apartment, slamming the door loudly right in Julian's face. Evangeline was in a depressed state, driving her car far too fast, not even knowing where to go. No one was waiting for her anywhere. She longed for support, but there was no one she could turn to. That's why she felt such despair and emptiness, as if her situation had no way out. She didn't even realize she was speeding, risking her own life. In a way, she even thought that if something happened to her, no one would be upset. Her family would probably feel relieved to be rid of such a burden as her. The image of her fiancé's betrayal kept flashing in her mind. Why did he do it? Why did he betray her? How could they so easily throw her out of the family? Hadn't she given everything a good granddaughter should? She didn't care about their coldness, but she would not allow them to treat her so cruelly. Even as a child, she perfectly understood that her parents treated her sister far better than they treated her. On every holiday, her sister received all the attention and the gifts, while they only noticed her when she failed to meet their demands. Evangeline was always obedient and did everything her parents asked, but she never once received praise. They thought that was simply how it should be. Even her academic achievements couldn't make them notice her or respond the way they should have. She kept wondering why. How could they treat her this way? They didn't want to answer. They simply decided to get rid of her to avoid the trouble. Driving in her car, the girl clearly understood that she needed to calm down and think carefully about what she would do next. Passing by an upscale nightclub, she slowed down, suddenly getting the idea to go in. Eva parked nearby. Right now, she wanted to do something she had never done before. She'd always been told that a girl of her status shouldn't visit such places. It was shameful and could ruin the family's reputation. She had heard of this club before, so she was mentally prepared for an atmosphere she'd never experienced. But tonight, she didn't care what people might say about her. She felt a burning desire to go inside and do whatever she pleased. When she stepped into the nightclub, the atmosphere felt strange. The place was crowded, music blasted, and half-drunk people were partying wildly. Evangeline headed straight for the bar, where she could sit down and order a drink. Tonight, she wanted the strongest drink on the menu. She had never been a fan of alcohol, but tonight she wanted to get drunk enough to forget her problems, even if only for a while. Her first sip of whiskey was harsh. The drink burned and left a bitter taste in her mouth. The bartender noticed she was an unusual guest. She clearly wasn't used to strong alcohol. Maybe he should suggest something more fitting for a lady. A drink with a pleasant taste that wouldn't cause such heavy intoxication. She thanked the bartender but insisted on whiskey. She didn't want anything else. She had come here tonight to drink and have fun for the first time in her life. Watching the crowd, she realized just how much she had missed. She had never learned to have fun like ordinary young people. The girl looked at the girls dancing happily and felt envious. They seemed to have no worries at all, simply enjoying life. But when she looked at her own reflection, she realized she had spent too much of her life working hard, never once enjoying herself like they did. She was completely different from modern youth, not only in the way she dressed, but in her whole outlook on life. Why did she spend all her thoughts on the family company, treating it like her own, instead of enjoying the simple things other people loved? If she thought about it, she had never really had a childhood or a teenage life, all wasted on chasing meaningless diplomas. All because she wanted to please and impress her so-called loving family. She had worked like a slave, pouring all her strength and energy into saving the company. But for what? No one appreciated it. She had spent countless nights at the office, ignoring her personal life, the kind of life she should have been living at her age. No one cared about her efforts. As long as her work produced results, the family was satisfied. Her well-being didn't matter. Her so-called family, who never valued her, stripped her of the position she had worked so hard for, just to hand it to their precious daughter. Even her fiancé tossed her aside like a useless toy no one wanted anymore. The man beside her smiled, remarking that her life sounded more like one long drama than a real life. Eva knew he was right, but it hurt too much to accept. So she drowned her sorrows in strong whiskey. She kept drinking, one glass after another, even though she'd already had way too much. It was true what they said. She wasn't a real member of the Young family. That explained their treatment of her, and she accepted it. She wasn't tied to them by blood, so they never considered her one of their own. She had known she was just a pawn in their game. But what hurt most was how easily they discarded her without a second thought. Evangeline told herself to remember this, because from now on, she would never allow herself to be humiliated again. She would make them pay for throwing her away, for treating her like a slave they could exploit and discard whenever they pleased. She would make them all regret it, every single one who had ever mistreated her. The man pointed out that her family was wealthy and she didn't have enough resources to take them down. But tonight she was ready to agree to anything for revenge. Her decisions were impulsive, fueled by rage. The man sitting beside her seemed far too attractive and kind to be interested in her. Why would such a handsome man pay attention to her, when everyone else called her ugly and disgusting? The young man wondered how exactly she planned to make them regret what they had done. Did she already have a plan for revenge? The girl wondered why she should share her plans with him, just to satisfy his curiosity? Did he want to help her? But she hadn't asked for his help. She would definitely find a way and deal with her family on her own. Evangeline hadn't thought about that yet. Tonight she just wanted to do all the things she had missed out on during her teenage years. Did she have enough money or any influential connections to fight her powerful family and destroy them? After years of working as the company's CEO, Eva had some savings, but she knew perfectly well it wouldn't be enough. Still, she would definitely find a way. She had been raised to always achieve her goals at any cost, no matter the difficulties along the way. Of course, right now she had none of those things, but she knew for sure that in the near future, she would. She would definitely find a way to bring them all to their knees, and they would end up begging her to stop. She would do whatever it took to make them regret everything they had done to her. All those years of cruelty. Even if she had to sell her soul to the devil, She wouldn't waste time thinking. She would still reach her goals. The young man realized she had drunk a lot already, but she should be careful with her words, because sometimes the devil really is nearby, ready to grant a wish in exchange for a soul. Ava hadn't expected to hear that. She pulled her hands away from him, suddenly worried about what she had just said. But if that devil was somewhere in this place, then he simply had to introduce her to him. Without a second thought, she would immediately agree to make a deal, no matter the price she'd have to pay. The young man smiled. He liked her boldness, her confidence. Still, he thought it was only the alcohol speaking. She should wait until her mind was clear before making such a choice. He didn't want to push her into a reckless decision she might regret in the morning. Because once he introduced her to the demon, there would be no turning back. The girl insisted she wasn't drunk at all. She couldn't wait that long. She wanted to know where the demon was and didn't want him worrying about her. Even if he asked her to follow him into hell, Eva would gladly go. If the devil could give her what she wanted, why wouldn't she agree? The young man listened carefully, fully aware of her state, so he wasn't rushing to take any unnecessary steps. He stood up and leaned closer to her. He didn't want anyone else overhearing their conversation. He was standing very close now, but this time the girl didn't step back. He was very attractive, and she liked talking to him. The man was tall, well-built, and unlike anyone else in the place. Even his clothes were different from those of the other young men. Everything about him felt right, and to him, her wish was law. He would gladly fulfill it. Still, he wondered if she had really thought this through, and whether she would change her mind once she realized what a big mistake she had made. But if she was truly certain, he would gladly introduce Evangeline to the demon. With just a snap of his fingers, the whole scene changed. It was an incredible place, unlike anything ordinary people could ever see. Eva opened her eyes. She couldn't understand what had happened, and it felt like she remembered nothing. Her shock knew no limits. She looked around, completely confused about where she was. The room was huge and luxurious. A massive chandelier hung in the center, dazzlingly beautiful. What was strange was that no one was beside her. She was alone. She tried to understand where she was, what kind of exquisite room this was. She rubbed her eyes, thinking it must be a dream. She recalled how she had entered the nightclub last night and drank a lot of alcohol. She must have had too much whiskey. That's why she couldn't remember what had happened. But she had to figure it out, because nothing made sense. Then she remembered the handsome man she had met at the club, the one she had talked with all evening. The last thing she recalled was him holding her hand, but nothing after that. The girl grew frightened. There was no memory of how she had ended up in this luxurious place, or how she found herself in a huge bed. Could something have happened? Something she had never allowed herself before? The thought struck her at once. Maybe he had used her helplessness for his own gain. Eva lifted the sheets, but saw she was still fully dressed. Was she so drunk that he had carried her in and laid her in bed without even undressing her? She looked around the room, puzzled. Why was she still here alone? Where had the man gone, the one who had brought her here? Then she noticed her jacket, shoes, and glasses neatly placed on a large chair, arranged as if fresh from the dry cleaners. Nervousness washed over her. For the first time, she was in a situation where she knew nothing and couldn't account for her own actions. Nothing had happened to her. She could see that. And yet deep down, she felt that something had, though she didn't know what. But why had he brought her here? Was she really in such a state that she couldn't make it home on her own? Now she was truly scared. She asked herself what kind of trouble she had gotten into. The bed was so high that Eva had to climb down using the small steps placed beside it. Everything around her was beautiful, expensive, luxurious. Who could possibly live in such a place? Surely someone very powerful. To her horror, she realized she smelled terrible, as if she had crawled out of a sewer after days inside. Eva went to the chair to pick up her clothes and shoes, but she had no idea which way to go to find an exit from this house. At first, she wanted to put on her shoes, but then decided against it. They might make too much noise. The farther she went, the more she marveled at the magnificence of the mansion. To her, it felt like a castle where a powerful man must live. Could she really be inside an old castle? She still couldn't understand how she had ended up here. Before her stood a grand marble staircase. Its elegance was unlike anything she had ever seen, even in movies. The bronze railings were hand-forged, decorated with intricate designs. Chandeliers, balconies. What kind of house was this? Surely one built in the 1800s? The central chandelier in the main hall was massive, hanging from a giant glass dome. Cautiously, Evangeline descended the stairs, barely watching her step, too distracted by the details of the house. Damn. she thought when she saw the enormous fireplace in the living room. The fireplace was lit, radiating warmth. Eva wanted to step closer because she felt a little cold. Was she really alone in this house? The thought made her shiver. How had she ended up in such a place? She knew her city well, but had never seen a house like this, not even in the elite neighborhoods. Suddenly, Eva noticed a massive door. She didn't know where it led, but she thought that was the way she needed to go. Without thinking, she rushed to the door, hoping it would lead her outside. Once there, she could figure out how to get home. Just as she touched the handle, she heard a voice behind her. She froze. It wouldn't be polite to leave without thanking the man for helping her. The man asked if she really intended to run away without even saying goodbye. Even though she was terrified, she stopped, wanting to figure out the details that had brought her here in the first place. The girl looked around and saw the same man, the handsome stranger she had met at the nightclub. He was dressed in casual home clothes, holding a glass of red wine in his hand early in the morning. Did this massive house really belong to him? Who was he to have such wealth at such a young age? Eva didn't even know what to say. She was too ashamed to admit she couldn't remember a single thing. Then she finally gathered the courage to ask him the one question that was eating her alive. Where exactly was she? And what was this place? The man frowned and casually told her she was in hell itself. Eva didn't believe him, thinking it was a bad joke. But his expression said something completely different. When he smiled, Eva felt offended. Did he really think this was funny? Still, in this moment, she could believe in anything, even demons. He clearly remembered her wishing last night to meet the devil. Had her wish already changed so quickly? Eva thought he was acting suspicious today. Why was he playing strange games with her? She was sick of it all. All she wanted now was to go home and forget this nightmare ever happened. Last night, upset and drunk, Eva had said too much. She claimed she was ready to sell her soul to the devil, without ever thinking of the consequences. She'd even asked where the demon was, telling the man not to worry about her. She had said if the devil wanted to drag her to hell, she would gladly go, so long as he gave her what she wanted. Why would she ever refuse that? The moment she remembered her words from last night, she realized he hadn't been joking at all. Eva felt completely uncomfortable. The whole situation was beyond absurd. Noticing how tense and nervous she was, the man slowly stepped closer. He didn't want to push too hard, but carefully reached out his hand toward her face. His movements felt strange to Eva, and she stiffened. He didn't act like normal men her age. He touched her forehead with his finger, trying to pull her focus back to him. All he wanted was for her to relax, and then for some reason, he called her his little fluffy kitten. Eva hated that. She pushed his hand away and warned him never to call her that again. She wasn't his pet. He actually liked her fiery temper, but her boldness still surprised him. She held onto his hand, refusing to let go, making sure he wouldn't touch her face again. He remembered how serious Eva always was. He didn't like it. He wanted her to loosen up. Eva shoved his hand away hard and told him never to do that again. He was mistaking her for someone easy. She had already decided to leave, and there was nothing he could do to stop her. He had no right to. Still, she thought it only polite to thank him for his hospitality and for all the trouble she had caused. She headed for the door, but it was clear he wasn't planning to let her go so easily. He was going to get in her way. As soon as she touched the doorknob, she realized he was standing right behind her. In one swift motion, he slammed the door shut and held it closed, keeping her inside. He ordered her to stay put and stop trying to run. It was pointless. After all, she had made it clear last night she wanted to meet the demon. If she thought her little outburst would be enough, then he apologized. But that wasn't going to cut it. It pained him to disappoint her, but the devil wasn't going to be satisfied with just that. Promises had to be kept, especially after what she'd done. Eva couldn't remember anything. She begged him to wait, to tell her what exactly she had done that was so serious she couldn't go home without settling her debt with the devil. Clearly, she really didn't remember. The man softened a little, not pressing as hard. But he figured he would have to show her proof, something to make her believe he wasn't making this up. Eva had no idea what he meant by proof. Calmly turning around, he gestured to himself and once again called her his kitten. He stood motionless behind her, but Eva couldn't understand what he was pointing to. She didn't see anything. Was he joking again? She didn't get it. With the look she gave him, she made it clear she wasn't in the mood for stupid games. Then he opened his robe, revealing his bare torso. Was he just showing off his body? Eva thought so and ignored the hint. But no, she was missing it. The proof was right there in front of her. She had to look closely. The evidence was impossible to miss unless she chose to ignore it. He stood calmly in front of her while Eva searched for anything unusual, anything that might prove what he meant. Finally, realizing she'd take too long, he pulled back his robe at the shoulder and pointed to a large bite mark on his neck. The proof was undeniable, right in front of her eyes. But Eva had no idea how it happened, because she couldn't remember a thing. The mystery of what had happened just hours ago. They had to start from the very beginning, so no important detail would be missed. When Eva left the nightclub with her new acquaintance, she had no idea where they were going. She could barely stand from all the alcohol. And it was a crowded place, but the man told her they had already arrived. He warned her to be ready. She was about to see things she'd never faced before. Suddenly, they ended up near her car. Eva was stunned. Had he tricked her? Angrily, she demanded to know where was the devil. He had promised to arrange the meeting. Was her car supposed to be the devil? The man just smiled. He enjoyed the way this drunk girl got mad, impatient for her encounter with the demon. He had kept the suspense going for so long that she was getting even more irritated. But he was a master at it, and he savored every moment. Eva started to wonder if he was trying to trick her, to take advantage of her vulnerable state. Of course not. That wasn't his plan at all. The truth was, the devil had told him he didn't like talking to drunk people. That was why he was going to send her home. But she had nothing to worry about. Once she rested, he would personally introduce her to the demon. Eva thought he was wrong about her being drunk. She told him clearly she felt perfectly fine. But it was obvious she could hardly stand. Her legs kept giving out, stumbling over each other. The stranger tried to support her again and again, but Eva kept falling straight into his arms. He asked Eva for her address, or at least a phone number of someone close to her who could take her home. That reminder of her family stung. They had betrayed her so badly. She grew upset, almost to tears, wanting anyone, to finally show her compassion. She had no desire to go home. She had no one to call, no one she could lean on. Her loved ones weren't there for her. And besides, she didn't want them to see her like this. Suddenly, a look appeared in her eyes, as if a brilliant idea had struck her, one she absolutely intended to carry out. She walked up to the man and tried to push him toward her car. If she had no one else to rely on, then he had no choice. He had to take her to the devil right now. Eva couldn't wait any longer. She wasn't about to waste her time on empty promises. Besides, she was in no condition to drive. He had to be the one behind the wheel. She was so insistent, she made it clear she wouldn't accept no for an answer. She shoved the stranger into the driver's seat of her car, then staggered around to the other side. At first, she couldn't get the door open, and then she struggled to lift her leg onto the seat. Finally, Eva collapsed into the seat and shut the door behind her. She felt proud she managed it herself, and now they could leave without delay. But she didn't understand why he still hadn't kept his promise, when she had been crystal clear about her wishes. The stranger agreed to be her driver, but he needed an address. He had no idea where to take her. Eva, surprised, asked what he was waiting for. Why hadn't he started the engine yet? If he didn't want to be her driver for free, she could pay him for the service. She wasn't joking. She grabbed her purse, ready for him to name his price. But when she opened her wallet, all she had were credit cards, not a single bill in cash. She asked if he would mind her transferring the money straight to his account. Then, with a sly smile, she wondered aloud if he was expecting some other form of payment. But the man stayed silent. He had no desire to answer her absurd questions, and her behavior wasn't exactly impressive. Sitting in the car next to this stranger, now at the wheel of her own vehicle, Eva couldn't believe she was doing this. She had never acted this way before. Suddenly, she noticed a young couple right in front of her car, kissing each other passionately. She had never seen anything like it. She thought such behavior in public was improper. To her, love between a man and a woman was supposed to belong to quiet, private moments. The girl kissed the boy's neck tenderly, holding his head in her hands. Couldn't they do this somewhere private instead? The kiss grew so intense she even began to nibble on him. He gently lifted her into his arms and she clung to his neck, continuing to kiss him softly. Eva was so fixated on this couple that for a moment she forgot all about the stranger next to her, the one who had promised her a meeting with the infamous demon. She couldn't believe it. True happiness was hidden in small things she had always overlooked. Work had completely consumed her life, leaving no room for love. The couple got into their car and drove off. It was as if they hadn't noticed anyone around them, like they were the only two people in the universe. Eva turned back to the stranger, staring at him with an unblinking gaze. He didn't understand that look. Every time she stared at him like that, it meant she was plotting something reckless. He had no idea what to expect. Tonight, she seemed ready for anything. things she had never dared to try in her youth. Tonight, Eva wanted to be unpredictable. All her life, she had done what pleased everyone else, but never herself. She was ready to do something she might regret later, but she wanted to feel it, experience it for herself. Climbing onto the seat with her legs, she leaned toward him, determined to finally take her pleasure. It caught him off guard, but he didn't resist. After all, Eva was the one who had crossed the line, and for once he didn't have to make a move himself. The girl said she didn't have any cash, so she decided to pay him in a completely different way. Unless, of course, he was against it. In that case, he'd just have to wait for payment for a while. Looking at him, Eva understood that this young man wouldn't resist, so she moved on to decisive actions. She thought that this should be enough to completely settle things with him. Eva hugged him and carefully pressed her lips to his neck. She really wanted to repeat the actions of that other girl, fully aware that he would enjoy it. The man didn't even move to hug her, but he didn't push her away either. So Eva continued carrying out her plan. Eva kissed his neck so firmly that she then wanted to leave a mark on him, one he would remember for a long time. Hugging him and pressing against his chest, the girl noticed that this man smelled incredibly good, though the scent was very specific and unfamiliar to her. The young man tried to restrain her, believing she needed to stop immediately, otherwise she would regret her actions. Tonight she was drunk, and that pulled her toward foolish behavior. He knew very well that the next day she would inevitably feel ashamed of herself. She tried again to kiss his neck, but still wanted to bite him. She hadn't expected that in such a moment she'd suddenly be hit by a wave of nausea. The large amount of alcohol Eva had consumed was rejected by her body, forcing its way out. The man grabbed his head as he hadn't expected such a spectacular ending. To make matters worse, it all ended up on his clothes, leaving him completely soaked and filthy. He tried to bring the girl to her senses, explaining that he had known from the start her idea was a mistake. It was clear she felt awful. Her body trembled as if she were freezing. He gently laid her down on the seat and adjusted it so she could lie comfortably. It was obvious that retreat was no longer an option, so the young man decided to make a phone call. He needed help. Help was urgently needed, especially since his elegant suit had been ruined. While Eva rested on the seat, he waited for assistance to arrive. When he noticed that his request had been fulfilled, he carefully stepped out of the car to take care of things without disturbing the girl. As he walked, he was already undressing, eager to get rid of his dirty clothes and change into something clean. But it became clear that his request hadn't been fully met, so changing entirely wasn't an option. All he could do was take off his shirt and hand it to the assistant who had arrived. The man stood bare-chested in the middle of the street, which was unusual for him. Nothing like this had ever happened before. Once all his dirty clothes were handed over to the assistant, the young man was able to get back into the car. Would he really have to drive shirtless? If so, he was willing to do it, for Eva's sake. Now they could finally set off, but he still needed to decide where exactly they should go. At this moment, Eva couldn't make any reasonable decisions, so it was up to him. He tried waking her up to ask for an address, but the girl remained sound asleep. Fine, he thought. If she was so determined to meet the devil, then he'd take her with him to hell. She had left him no other choice. He laid the girl across his chest. She continued to sleep deeply, unaware of what awaited her once she woke up. Could she really be in such despair that she was willing to meet a demon and strike a deal with him, all for the sake of revenge against her family? It was clear that a new chapter awaited Eva. From this moment, her life would change drastically, though at first she wouldn't be able to accept it. Now they could return to real time. It seemed everything had become clear, so Eva wouldn't deny that deep down, she truly wanted to meet the devil. The girl grew upset. It felt like she really had gone crazy. The alcohol brought nothing but a pounding headache. She knew she had never attracted men as a real woman would, since she always considered herself unattractive, and a girl who didn't know how to talk to men. But this man, it seemed he had some mysterious plan. Maybe he had hidden motives that worked in his favor. His whole story sounded perfect, but Eva remembered nothing. So she decided to ask him directly. What did he want from her? How much money did he need? In the past, men who hovered around her always had their eyes on her wealth, so she assumed today's stranger was no exception. But glancing around again, Evangeline couldn't figure out what this place was. The house looked ridiculously grand, almost over the top. That made her wonder if someone like him even needed her money. Besides, he clearly knew her family had just fired her from her director's position, so she'd soon be facing serious financial trouble. 100 different thoughts rushed through her head. If this man wasn't the true master of the house but only pretending to be, she had to find out what he really wanted. Yet looking at him, it was obvious. He had the aura of an aristocrat. His behavior and manners were miles apart from modern youth. His clothes were refined, and he resembled someone who ran massive companies. Judging by his build, he was in top physical form, the kind men strove for. Eva had crossed paths with high society types before, but this man radiated a much stronger, almost overwhelming energy. Who exactly was he? She wondered. Maybe it was just the alcohol making her imagine things, but then she dared to ask outright, who was he really, and why was he interested in her? Who was he? Had she only just started caring? He wanted to hear her thoughts. Who did she imagine him to be? Or who could she compare him to? Eva grew angry. Her head was throbbing, and she had no time for guessing games. Her temper and bluntness began to irritate the man. It stung, too, because he had dropped hints about himself several times, and she hadn't noticed a thing. He was strange indeed. How could her dismissive attitude not annoy him? Most people she'd met, men and women alike, couldn't wait to end their conversations with her, except for business meetings. So why was this man going out of his way to keep their talk alive? And more than that, why was he the one insisting she stay? Maybe she had thought about it already but refused to believe it. Now he was glad to say it out loud. He was the real devil. Eva stared at him, still unsure. Maybe he was joking again, but the thought that it could be true sent chills through her. In her imagination, the devil looked nothing like this. That's what made it so strange. This man seemed like an ordinary human. She felt uncomfortable, like she was nothing more than a living toy being played with by someone who knew all the rules while she didn't. If she was just some kind of joke to him, then she'd walk out of this house immediately. As usual, he ignored her, believing there was no need to explain further. She could just see for herself. From early morning, this mysterious man was already enjoying a glass of wine, sipping it in the slowest, most delicate way. Eva watched his every move carefully, still waiting for answers. She couldn't tell what was real and what was just a joke. Was it just her imagination, or was he actually trying to seduce her? His effortless gestures stirred indecent thoughts. How could a man project both sensuality and elegance at the same time, just by drinking wine? He was dangerous, no doubt. With someone like him, any woman needed to stay on guard. She still didn't understand what he meant when he placed her finger on her forehead, as if trying to disconnect her from reality. But he repeated the gesture and told her that if she kept frowning so much, she'd end up with wrinkles, and no amount of Botox would fix them. But was it really her fault she was squinting right now? For the last time, she warned him. If he kept joking around, she'd leave immediately. But he wasn't joking at all. He was completely serious, and once again, he called her his little kitten. His words, that he truly was the devil, sounded more convincing to Eva than ever, and she wasn't drunk anymore. Enough with the tricks, he just needed to let her go. The devil agreed, but still wasn't in any rush to release her. After all, now that they had met, she was bound to him. Now that Eva had realized who he really was, he decided to reveal a little more about himself. His name was Gage Acheron, and the way it rolled off his tongue made it sound as though he was above even the highest aristocrats, someone who ruled them all from above. Gage Acheron. Eva repeated his name to herself once more. She had heard it somewhere before but couldn't recall exactly where. They extended their hands to each other and shook, thus confirming their formal introduction. The devil held her hand for a long time, not even trying to let go, but Eva remained polite, so she couldn't pull it away. Then she remembered she should introduce herself as well and say her full name. Just as she was about to, her thoughts drifted back to the events of the previous day. During her conversation with him yesterday, she had mentioned her grandfather's name more than once, a name well known to everyone. She had spoken about her beloved fiancé, who betrayed her with someone close, once he discovered that she was not the true granddaughter of the Young family. Recalling yesterday again made her nervous. Her reckless act had accomplished nothing, only wasted her time. Eva understood perfectly well that she needed to sort out all the misunderstandings with this man, because her behavior had been completely wrong. She deeply regretted what she had done yesterday since she had been drunk and terribly upset. Remembering everything she had allowed herself to do with this man filled her with shame. It was hard for her to even process. She couldn't believe that she had been the one to behave that way. First, being so drunk, and then forcing herself on a man against his will. She truly felt embarrassed about it and hoped he would understand and forgive her. But the demon had his own plans. Besides, he wasn't offended at Eva at all, yet he had no intention of letting her go. A voice inside told Eva that she had never in her life done anything so foolish that she would later regret. She stood there waiting for the demon to act, perhaps to offer to take her home since she had no idea where she was. She clearly realized that he didn't look like a man in dire need of money, so she couldn't simply buy her way out. But that was all she had to offer. to compensate for the inconvenience she had caused. Other than money, she had nothing. It was clear this man wasn't very talkative. He calmly swirled the wine in his glass and enjoyed its aroma. The demon frowned. He had his own plan for her, and her insistence on paying him with money irritated him. "This will be very problematic," the man remarked, knowing that Eva wouldn't like what he was about to say. "Since I was the victim here, shouldn't I be the one to choose the compensation? Or do you see it differently? Trying to solve everything on your own?" She was puzzled by his words. Did he really consider himself the victim? And her the aggressor who had forced herself on him while he couldn't resist? It became clear that they belonged to two different worlds. Their understanding of the situation was drastically different. All this time, the man kept trying to show her the marks left on him from her persistence the night before. Addressing him, Eva called him Mr. Acheron, because she didn't feel she could speak to him as an equal. He didn't like that much, so he suggested she simply call him Gage. Eva agreed. Calling him Gage was indeed much easier. Still, she needed to know what he truly wanted from her. He was very modest, he claimed, and couldn't possibly ask too much of such a beautiful girl. All he wanted was for Eva to stay with him in this house until the mark on his neck disappeared. Eva didn't understand why he needed that, since such a mark could fade in just a few days. What would he gain from it? She couldn't imagine, but she had to decide and give him an answer. From his expression, it was clear that he expected only a positive reply. After all, he considered himself the victim. And this was his compensation for the inconvenience. But with him, anything could be expected. Bite marks or hickeys, left untreated, would heal in about 7 to 10 days, maybe even 2 weeks. That would take up far too much of her time. And knowing he liked to drag things out, it really could last 2 full weeks, a whole 14 days. It was clear this man was toying with her. He kept playing his favorite game, one he had invented himself. She was absolutely certain that the moment she took his bait, he would burst out laughing. If he considered himself the victim, then the punishment he had devised for her was something he knew she would hate. She needed to quickly come up with a compromise, something where both of them could win and neither would have to suffer. But the demon was firm in his decision. He believed she had no choice but to accept his proposal. Eva stood in front of him, unable to give an answer, fully aware that the demon was waiting for at least some kind of reaction from her. She still hoped Gage was joking, but he was completely serious. This was no trick of his. She wished he would give her at least a minute, since she was used to thinking things through. Spontaneous decisions never led to anything good. Unbelievably, he might even be expecting something more from her. But she couldn't allow it. Not with a man she barely knew. Gage Acheron wasn't the kind of man who would take advantage of a girl's desperate state and force her into something she didn't want. If she thought he intended to turn her into his personal slave and make her obey his every whim, then he was sorry to disappoint her, but she was entirely mistaken in her assumptions. Evangeline was surprised. She hadn't even considered that she might be wrong. From his behavior, she had been convinced that's exactly what he wanted from her. If he didn't need money and didn't want her to fulfill his desires, then why insist she stay in this house? Unless, of course, all he wanted was for her to remain there until the bite mark on his neck disappeared. She had understood correctly. What he needed right now was a companion. Once again, she was astonished. He now seemed like a child in need of a new friend to ease his loneliness in this huge house. His maid had recently run away, and he needed time to find a proper replacement. Since Eva was already here, it was the perfect opportunity to make her repay him. Each time he spoke, his words struck her as pure nonsense. Had he planned from the very start to make her his servant? She might still have questions for him, but she didn't want to hear another, "I don't like this," from him. He smiled again and asked if she would prefer spending the night with him, rather than being his helper. How convenient, Eva thought, realizing that in any option he offered, she would still end up doing something she hadn't agreed to. Why did she have the feeling that this sly devil was deceiving her? But she couldn't figure out how. Yet she had no choice. In this enormous house, there wasn't a single soul besides him. And maybe he really did live here alone. Being by himself in such a vast place must have been unbearable. Gage suggested she relax, calm down, and not get her panties in a twist. She just needed to go with the flow, stay alert, and she would manage. To soothe her, the demon once again placed his hand on her head, as if performing some demonic ritual. He was amused, finding Eva a very charming girl, but she didn't like it. She didn't want him treating her like that. She was an adult, not a child. The demon noticed she had a strong character. When she didn't like something, she could be very prickly. From this moment on, she was forbidden from leaving the house until the mark on his neck disappeared. And since the wound was deep, it would require proper care, which would, of course, become part of her duties. Eva could do everything required, but she refused to promise obedience or allow him to act like a complete scoundrel. This feels like a curse, Eva thought, upset that one foolish mistake had dragged her into such a mess. She followed behind the devil, anxious and uncertain of what awaited her in the coming weeks. She seemed to have both a talent and terrible luck for running into strange people. And today she had landed in a truly awkward situation with unpleasant consequences. Even though this man was very handsome, he still acted strangely, not like ordinary people. Maybe yes, maybe no, but a devil this attractive could easily have hidden motives. He might seem sweet now, only to devour her alive later. Her inner voice kept throwing out odd thoughts, ones she disagreed with in reality. She knew perfectly well that overthinking was just as harmful. Why would such a wealthy, handsome man bother seducing her? He could easily have any beauty in the world. So why Eva? Wearing big, old-fashioned glasses and treating men coldly, to the point that no normal guy ever wanted to talk to her. Eva hadn't expected that she would be arguing with her own inner voice, debating such ordinary things. Her inner voice was no help at all. What she needed was a way out of the situation. Gage sat down in his enormous chair and invited Eva to come closer. She wished he would wait. Didn't he realize she needed to go home first? She didn't have any spare clothes with her. She would need to fetch them from her apartment if she was to stay in this enormous house for a while. But he told her not to worry. He was ready to have someone bring her everything she needed during her stay. After all their long conversation, he finally finished his wine and now held the empty glass in his hand. The man pulled a phone from his pocket and called someone, explaining that he needed women's clothing, specifying her size. She wanted him to wait. She hadn't even decided yet whether she would agree to this or not. The man said their deal was already sealed since he had already told her she couldn't leave this place, and Eva agreed. A word once spoken is like a bird, hard to catch again. While they waited for the clothes, she could go back to her room and take a shower, and he would bring the clothes later. She didn't have to rush, but once she finished, she absolutely had to return to him in the living room. The man continued his phone conversation, explaining things in detail, spelling out his whims. Eva thought maybe she smelled unpleasant, which was exactly why she needed to shower and freshen up. She realized it was time to go, since the devil was busy and paid her no attention. The house was huge, but she remembered perfectly well where to go and easily found her room. The best thing that could happen to her right now was a warm shower that relaxed her and let her forget everything that had happened lately. After showering, Eva stepped out of the bathroom and immediately noticed a very cute pink pajama with a childish print lying on the bed. Next to it was pink underwear, completely unlike hers. She instantly thought that this stern giant of a man actually had a very strange taste. Eva had no choice, since there were no other clothes, so she had to put on the pajama and head straight to the devil in the living room. Thank God he finally got dressed, Eva thought. His terribly perfect body really distracted her. The girl decided that this time she had to take the conversation into her own hands and also set some boundaries she wouldn't cross. But why did it have to happen right now? She wasn't ready at all, so she covered her face with her hand as if trying to collect herself. Gage unexpectedly sat down beside her, pointing out that in his house one had to wear indoor slippers, so she absolutely had to put them on. She couldn't believe her eyes. Could this man really show care and personally do things that were so uncharacteristic of him? When he began slipping the slippers onto her feet, Eva even liked it, since no one had ever done anything like that for her before. Although she was surprised, it felt very pleasant. Besides, the slippers were really cute and warm. These slippers were his favorite, so she absolutely had to wear them. The house was large, and the marble floor was cold. For a few seconds, a thought crossed her mind. Maybe it wasn't for nothing she stayed in this house with the devil, because here she might finally feel like a real woman, cared for. Eva couldn't understand what he was doing. Wasn't he supposed to force her to stay as his maid? Then why was he personally helping her? The man noticed his companion was lost in thought and asked if something was wrong. Did she dislike him helping her put on slippers? Could he really be kind? Then why hadn't he shown this side before? Did he want her to have a completely different impression of him? The girl answered very softly that everything was fine. She was just very tired, and the nice shower helped her relax. It was strange to see him kneeling at her feet, helping her. Even her inner voice couldn't have imagined this. There was no time to think. Maybe for him it was nothing, but she simply couldn't pull herself together. She tried to breathe deeply, but her heart kept pounding too hard. It seemed noticeable even from above. When the man finally slipped the slippers onto her feet, he suggested she follow him. They still had a lot to do. She expected anything, but still couldn't guess where he was leading her. Fine, Eva thought. She had to choose the right moment to convince him to let her go home earlier than agreed. As she followed behind him, she started to suspect he was leading her to the kitchen. Maybe she would have to cook him a meal. She wondered what this devil even ate, since his tastes surely differed from humans. Her inner voice whispered he might make her cook for him, even though everyone knew she couldn't cook at all. That made sense. Why else head to the kitchen? The moment he tried her food, Eva could already imagine his face after tasting her masterpieces. That's exactly the plan she came up with. She would make him such a terrible meal he wouldn't want her anymore. As soon as this devilishly handsome man tried her legendary awful food, he would kick her out immediately, and that would be her easiest escape. Walking behind him, she became certain she had found a way to leave the house, and on his initiative, no less. Yes, that's what she'd do. She would see his reaction, how quickly he'd change his mind. Gage pointed to a huge chair in the middle of the kitchen, almost like a throne, and suggested Eva sit more comfortably. Why was he asking her to sit? She had expected him to tell her where the food was so she could start cooking. The man was very polite, repeating several times that she should please sit down in the chair. Eva didn't want to argue, so she sat on the huge chair. She didn't understand what the hell was going on, but braced herself to accept things as they came. The man went to the fridge himself, opened it, and began pulling out food. Eva was shocked. Wasn't he supposed to make her do it? Gage took out lettuce leaves and vine tomatoes, so Eva assumed he was going to make a simple salad. He grabbed a cutting board and began chopping the vegetables himself without even asking Eva to help. Impossible, Eva thought. She had to do something about this. After a moment, she offered to help him. Gage refused, telling her she could rest, just sit and watch how skillfully he worked. What was going on? Wasn't she supposed to cook since she had agreed to be his temporary maid in this huge house, following all his requests? Why had he ordered her to simply sit and watch? Eva couldn't believe it and suspected something was off. She didn't understand what was happening at all, but she was curious what he was thinking. He worked calmly, as if he cooked for himself every day. Did he want to impress his guest, show his culinary skill? Again, her inner voice told her the devil was too suspicious. His behavior was strange every time, even though he didn't seem human at all. That was true. He clearly had some hidden plan, otherwise why act so oddly toward a stranger? Slipping slippers on her feet, now cooking in the kitchen? Who would treat a stranger this way? Exactly. But right now she had no choice. She couldn't afford another mistake. She had to remember. He was insanely rich and very handsome. And she knew better than anyone how unpredictable, incredibly rich people could be when things didn't go their way. So she had to do as he asked, force herself to accept his care. Maybe he simply didn't often have guests in his massive house. And honestly, it wasn't a bad idea. She could stay a few days, she had nowhere to rush, and this man cared for her like no one else ever had. While Gage Acheron, the richest devil, cooked lunch for her, Eva enjoyed a rest she hadn't had in ages. She knew this was her first time experiencing such a thing, so she decided to accept it and go along with his unreal schemes. Still, she had to react cautiously to his actions. His reactions could be unpredictable. The man quickly finished the main dish, and it looked like it came from an elite restaurant. The aroma was incredible, and Eva was pleased. Gage sat at the table beside her and told her to taste it. Plus, the dish would help with her hangover. Even though the food looked amazing and smelled divine, Eva grew a bit nervous. Whenever she was scared, she would nibble her nails. She had watched him cook, staring like she was solving a difficult puzzle. The man was sure she would have noticed if he had slipped in anything strange. Did she really look that suspicious for Gage to notice? She wondered what he thought, realizing Eva suspected him of trying to harm her. She had no other choice. She had to taste the dish, even though she was terribly nervous. The girl picked up a spoon, scooped a little, and slowly lifted it to her mouth. When Eva tasted the food, she realized it was delicious. So good she could eat it without pretending to like it. From her expression, Gage couldn't tell if she enjoyed it, so he asked her directly. She was very surprised, but tried to stay serious. About the food, she could only say it was simply wonderful. Nothing like anything she had ever tasted before. This man was incredibly rich, had an amazing physique, and on top of that, cooked deliciously. He was a true treasure for any girl who could become his other half. Compared to him, she was no cook at all. If he ever asked her to do it, he would quickly realize they'd go hungry. She thought it wasn't very good. Even though she was very hungry, she had to admit it was the most delicious chicken noodle soup she had ever tasted. Eva kept eating the soup, unable to stop. Gage sat across from her, watching her enjoy his masterpiece. It made him happy to see her pleased, so he was very satisfied. He rarely got the chance to cook for guests. It didn't happen often. To make sure the girl was well fed, the man offered her some toast with butter, also homemade. The girl felt a little embarrassed at eating so quickly. She didn't want to seem gluttonous, so she tried to follow proper table manners. Wanting to keep the conversation going, she asked if he might actually be a disguised sorcerer, fattening her up to eat her later. The man thought her joke was very funny and clever, since he knew the girl clearly had no problems with her appetite. He didn't understand. Maybe she had meant to tease him, but it turned out as if she had been joking about herself, which made it even funnier for him. Eva couldn't figure out what made him laugh so much, because her question seemed completely normal, judging by the atmosphere in his house and his behavior overall. For the first time, Gage laughed for so long. Why didn't the girl take jokes lightly and treated everything too seriously? Had she really never had moments in her life where she could just relax and have fun? Eva wasn't used to joking. She always took everything literally. Such things had never happened in her life. She always followed the plan and tried to be the best at everything. The man could see she was very uncomfortable, but he wanted to see her reaction, so he added, "What would she do if it actually turned out to be true?" Eva tensed up even more, regretting that she had asked about it at all. She could have just stayed quiet. What was wrong with her? This devil was making her embarrass herself while he enjoyed the process. In fact, everything was written on her face, and he only had to play along with her nonsense. Her imagination was unique. The man himself could never come up with something like that. He realized she had a vivid fantasy and expected her to invent many more original things. Eva still tried to stay serious and continue the conversation. If he really was a witcher, could he maybe help her find her phone? She couldn't remember where she had left it. Why did she even need the phone when she hadn't thought about it for almost half the day? Still, he could help her, since he had no right to take that away from her. Gage reached into his pocket because her phone had been with him the whole time, and he had completely forgotten about it. When they had been at the nightclub, he had noticed it on the bar counter and picked it up when they were about to leave. He noted that the girl wasn't very careful with her things. He had planned to return it right away, but with everything that happened, he simply forgot. Did he really think she was irresponsible? In truth, she always tried to do everything properly, but this time she had let herself go and lost control. He easily handed her the phone, but when the girl reached to take it, Gage didn't let go right away, as if he wanted to add something more. Still, Eva carefully pulled it from the devil's hands, and when she looked at the screen, she realized she had missed a lot. While she had no access to her phone, she had received many calls and messages. The girl tried to go through them all, since there might be something very important for her. Just then, Eva's phone started ringing in her hands. When she looked down, she saw it was her secretary calling. Eva turned to Gage, apologizing that she needed to take the call immediately. But she didn't want to do it in front of him. The man didn't see any problem with that. He completely understood and didn't even try to stop her. Eva thanked him for his understanding and quickly went to another room. The phone kept ringing nonstop. The secretary was persistent, calling again and again until Eva finally picked up. Eva didn't even have time to say a word before the secretary, clearly relieved, greeted her cheerfully. She immediately asked where Eva was, explaining that there was a huge buzz on social media. Eva didn't understand what she meant. Was this about her demotion? She asked the secretary to slow down and explain what she meant by buzz. Eva said her phone had been off, and she hadn't seen any news. The secretary said it was about the official statement Eva had supposedly made last night, announcing that she had stepped down as CEO, effective immediately. The news almost made Eva collapse. She didn't remember making any such statement. Did someone do it in her name? She tried to explain that she never said or even thought about resigning. She never wanted to quit, but her grandfather insisted that she should step down voluntarily. However, rumors were already spreading that the real reason for her resignation was fraud and abuse of power. Eva couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her secretary didn't know what to do either. Reporters were calling nonstop, demanding a comment. The secretary asked where Eva was. If necessary, she could come pick her up. Eva decided to end the call. She needed time to think everything through and figure out her next move. Her phone was filled with messages, most of them from her secretary, still trying to keep her updated. Eva was trembling with anxiety. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't calm herself down. She decided to check the internet herself to see what was being said and who was behind spreading these false rumors. Her hands were shaking so much she dropped her phone. She didn't even try to catch it. The phone hit the floor, but Eva didn't rush to pick it up. She looked so distraught that Gage immediately went to help her. The devil quickly realized something bad had happened. His help would be useful. He picked up the phone, planning to hand it back to her, but he also decided he had the right to know what was going on. Eva was too upset to talk about her problems with someone she barely knew. She asked him to turn off her phone and not to ask her any questions she couldn't answer. Gage respected her wish and turned it off. The devil could clearly see she was shaking, and although he wanted to comfort her, he didn't want to be too pushy. Eva wanted to be alone, but the devil didn't want to leave her. When she walked toward another room, he followed. Luckily, someone rang the doorbell at that moment, and he stopped. He told Eva he had an unexpected guest and asked her to wait. He'd be right back. Eva calmed down a little and even got curious about who could be visiting him. During her stay, she hadn't seen a single soul in this house. Left alone, Eva couldn't understand why her family had gone this far. How could they do this to her after all her efforts to rebuild the company? Were they really trying to destroy her completely, just because she didn't share their blood? Eva swore she'd never forgive any of them. She would make them pay tenfold for every bit of pain they caused her. She knew she had to do something. If she stayed there doing nothing, she might lose control. She decided to leave the house and sort things out herself. Staying there any longer would only drive her crazy. Eva resolved to tell the devil she was leaving immediately. She had urgent matters to handle. But she stopped when she noticed Gage talking to a man who looked strangely familiar. It was Mr. Park, the notorious secretary of Mr. Carlson, the CEO of Asion's enterprise. What was he doing here? Eva overheard him say that his master had sent him to ask one final time. She didn't understand what it meant yet, so she decided to keep listening. Mr. Park asked if Gage was still uninterested in taking the CEO position at Asion. If not, the chairman would offer it to someone else. He already had a list of candidates. Eva was shocked. Were they really offering him the position of CEO at Asion, their rival company? Who on earth was this man? Gage looked like he was hesitating. The offer was tempting, but he knew it would mean tons of work. Mr. Park reminded him that he already had experience as one of the company's early founders when he was younger. He was confident Gage could handle the job easily. But Gage had lost interest in the project long ago, and Mr. Park surely knew that. If he accepted, he might run the company into the ground. Lack of motivation was a serious flaw, and it doesn't just appear overnight. The only benefit he'd gain was more money, and they both knew he didn't need it. He already had more money than he could ever spend, even in several lifetimes. Mr. Park said his master thought Gage might have been bored and just wanted to work again. But Gage knew that kind of life would bore him to death. He had no interest in working again. Mr. Park understood and promised to deliver his message to the chairman, who would start considering other candidates. Having listened to their conversation to the end, Eva couldn't hold back any longer and decided to speak up. She asked Mr. Park to wait a moment because she also had something to discuss with him, something that might actually interest him. Eva gathered her courage and confidently walked toward the men, even though she knew she was being rude by interrupting their conversation. For the first time, she acted boldly. She had no time to waste. This was her only chance to do something before losing control over the company. Mr. Park was shocked to see Miss Young in Gage's house. He immediately asked what she was doing there and why she wanted to speak with him. Without thinking twice, Gage quickly answered that Eva was staying with him and would be living there for a while. At first, Eva didn't like that he answered for her, but then she realized it was for the best. She wouldn't have been able to respond clearly anyway. Mr. Park looked at Gage suspiciously. He never imagined that this mysterious man would hide a woman in his house. And of all women, it had to be her, Evangeline Young, the CEO of their rival corporation. Knowing Miss Young, Mr. Park couldn't understand how such a disciplined, responsible person could have anything in common with Gage. Eva asked him to wait just a minute. She needed to discuss something important with Gage. But then she changed her mind. Maybe his advice could help her. So she grabbed his hand and pulled him along. Eva walked ahead and the man followed her. He had no idea what was going through her mind, but he was curious to find out. First, Eva wanted to talk to Gage and learn more about Mr. Park's proposal. Was he really planning to turn it down just because he was too lazy to work or deal with serious matters? But Gage saw it differently. He admitted he was terribly lazy and just wanted to enjoy life without being bothered by things that didn't bring him pleasure. He had no intention of spending his days and nights stuck in a director's chair trying to earn even more money he didn't need. Eva thought to herself, is this arrogant idiot seriously planning to retire early without a second thought? For a moment, she even felt the urge to wring his attractive neck so he'd stop saying such nonsense. She tried to calm herself down and convince herself that maybe he was just too honest, that he didn't want to take on something that might hurt others. That's why she made him an offer. If he didn't want the position, he could give it to her. She needed it. Maybe he didn't even know who she really was, but she had been, or rather, used to be, the CEO of the XY Corporation. He could hire her, and she promised to lead Aeson to the very top, even higher than who. Gage noticed the fire in her eyes. He could tell she was determined to make it happen, not for Aeson's success, but to take revenge on those who had wronged her. Gage knew Eva was the kind of woman who'd once pushed Zai to the top and surpassed Aeson without even trying to be number one. Yes, she truly was that woman. He'd lose a lot by refusing her offer. And besides, she promised to deliver exactly what she said. He needed to think carefully. He understood her motives, but he still couldn't see what was in it for him. Eva knew the board and the chairman would never accept her, since she was the former CEO of a rival company. They'd never believe she was sincere, and besides, those false rumors about her made her practically unemployable. She wasn't afraid of hard work, and unlike Gage, she wasn't lazy. That's why he should agree to the deal. She'd handle all the work herself. All he'd have to do was occasionally attend meetings and update her on the results. Together, they could crush Zai Corporation. Gage hesitated. Her offer was tempting. He wouldn't have to work, yet he'd still have something to keep him entertained and connected to powerful people. He asked again if Eva truly wanted to do all the work while staying in his shadow. She wouldn't get any recognition for it. Eva didn't care. That was fine by her. The only thing she wanted now was revenge. To make them regret everything they'd done to her. As she'd said before, she was willing to do anything to make her family feel the pain of losing what they cherished most. This would only be the beginning of their downfall. For all their so-called care and love, Eva intended to pay them back, in full. Gage couldn't understand why she'd sacrifice so much just for revenge. She could have started a new life, proved her worth, and built something even greater. But judging by the look on her face, Eva was dead serious. She'd said it more than once. She was ready to make a deal with the devil. He remembered that clearly. She had said it. And if she really meant it, there would be no turning back. Eva knew exactly what she was doing, and she was ready to go through with it no matter the cost. Gage smiled softly. He knew what such a deal could mean for her, and tried to convince her to slow down, to think it over. But since she was so determined, he asked, who offered her this deal now? He could give her anything she wanted, but his conditions would be far from pleasant, and she wouldn't be able to refuse them. At that moment, Eva had already made up her mind. She didn't even want to hear the terms. She agreed right away. But was she truly ready to pay the price? There would be no way back, and the road ahead would be brutal. Eva's thirst for revenge blinded her. She was ready for anything to satisfy her pride. Gage smirked slightly. Having such a beautiful and clever woman at his fingertips was tempting, but he wanted it to be her choice. When he asked again if she was sure about her decision, Eva replied firmly that she was, and that Mr. Acheron shouldn't doubt her words for even a second. He didn't understand why she called him Mr. Acheron. They'd agreed she could just call him Gage. Eva didn't get why it mattered so much to him. She saw no difference, so she told him to drop it. She was being completely serious. She wanted to focus on real issues, not waste time on meaningless details. The devil seemed pleased. He could tell she was finally starting to relax, even just a little. He believed that people should take things more lightly. When you do, success tends to follow naturally. Just do your job well and everything falls into place. He even found a moment to joke, saying that Mr. Gage and Darling actually sounded pretty nice together. His teasing irritated Eva so much she wanted to hit him. But she held herself back, though it wasn't easy. In a way, he liked seeing her annoyed. It made her look cute, almost like a little angry kitten. Jokes aside, Gage was finally ready to name his price for the deal. But he warned her first. It wouldn't be small. After Eva agreed to make a deal with the devil, she started feeling a bit nervous. She knew perfectly well that this deal would come at a very high price. She knew that moment would come sooner or later, so she was already expecting to hear what the cost would be. In truth, the girl had already prepared herself for the worst possible outcome because she knew exactly how this world worked. If you want something great, you have to be ready to pay for it because the only free cheese is in a mousetrap. Eva understood perfectly that when you make a deal with the devil, you never get exactly what you desire most, only what you asked for at the very start. When Gage suddenly proposed to her, actually asked her to marry him, she wasn't just shocked, she was speechless. She hadn't expected anything like that. At first, she thought he was joking again. His jokes were never funny. But then she realized he was being completely serious. Was he mocking her? Taking advantage of her desperate situation? That's what it felt like. But Gage wasn't joking this time. His offer was serious, and to be honest, didn't even require much effort from her. Did he really want to marry her? Why? She couldn't even imagine what his true motives were. When she asked if he really wanted to marry her, Gage said his answer should be obvious. He had no other desires. Did he really need a wife? Eva wondered. Not long ago, he told her he liked living alone and hated when anyone invaded his personal space. He tried to explain that he was tired of meaningless small talk, but the idea of having someone by his side, someone he could feel comfortable with, that's actually appealed to him. Was this just one of his whims? Maybe he wanted to try married life? Ava thought it was pointless. They could have just lived together without all that ceremony. Maybe his old man threatened to cut him out of the will if he didn't get married soon? Eva knew that kind of thing was common among the upper class. Arranged marriages for the sake of inheritance were practically a tradition. But Gage wasn't that type. He always made his own choices and lived by his own rules, no matter what anyone else thought. Still, one question bothered her. Why her? He barely knew her. Maybe this was all just some act, a show for someone else. He'd marry her, get what he wanted, then divorce her once she stopped being useful. Eva realized how crazy that sounded. But she couldn't help herself. The words just kept spilling out. Her inner voice told her to shut up already. Because honestly, arranged marriages weren't that unusual these days. Marrying for convenience was the norm. Love wasn't something people cared about anymore. She'd seen enough to know that. And besides, that was the only logical reason she could come up with. After all, a man like him could easily marry any rich, beautiful woman he wanted. Yet for some reason, out of all the women he could choose, he picked her. And Eva never saw herself as particularly beautiful. She was passionate, loyal, and deceived, but not beautiful, not wealthy, not an heiress. Her reputation was already ruined. Maybe that's what he wanted. A useful, obedient woman like her. Someone who'd offered to do all the corporate work for him. He must have already realized how talented she was, capable of handling any position with skill and confidence. Or maybe he chose her because it would be easy to throw her away once she'd played her part. Eva was the kind of woman who wouldn't cling or beg. Maybe that was the point. She was the type who'd sign the divorce papers without a word and walk away. If he hadn't done anything bad to her yet, she'd be naive to think he was doing this for anyone's sake but his own. Eva realized there was no point overthinking it. She had no other choice. So she asked again if he was truly sure about his decision. Did he really want her as his wife? Gage Acheron looked absolutely confident. He even teased her. Did she think she wasn't good enough for a man like him? That arrogance irritated her. Why did he enjoy confusing her every time she tried to be serious? She wanted to look confident too. After all, this marriage was beneficial for her as well. Honestly, she thought he was the lucky one, marrying a woman like her. Finally, Gage heard something reasonable from her. He didn't want her doubting this decision anymore. At this point, he took her words as acceptance. Her agreement to marry him and accept all his terms. But Eva wanted him to wait a little. Didn't he think they needed more time to talk things through? They had to discuss the terms before making anything official. She was sure he had his own conditions, and she wanted to know them all before signing anything. Gage realized again how smart she was. But he had to give Mr. Park his answer right now. If he didn't, he might lose the opportunity. Eva thought he could respond to Mr. Park first. They'd have plenty of time to talk afterward. But Gage couldn't do that. What if she changed her mind and ran away after he accepted the deal? Eva promised she wouldn't, and suggested they sign a contract right now. And she didn't mean a marriage contract. She meant a formal agreement for their arrangement. That idea actually sounded better to him, so he agreed to do exactly as Eva suggested. He pulled out his phone and ordered someone to prepare the contract immediately. While it was being drafted, he told Eva to wait here. He'd go talk to Mr. Park to keep him busy. That would give her time to think everything through one last time. Before leaving, he reminded her again, once she signed the contract, there'd be no turning back. He was almost out the door when he suddenly turned back. He had one more thing to say to her. He stood behind her, close enough for her to feel his warm breath on her neck, and it made her tense up instantly. Gage leaned over her and whispered in her ear that he was giving her one last chance to back out. A final opportunity, if she wanted to take it. One last chance to back out. What did that even mean? Eva didn't understand. She paced the room, trying to go over every possible outcome in her head. Deep down, she knew she had nothing left to lose, so she could make her decision without any hesitation. Gage didn't make her wait too long. After a short while, he appeared in the room again, holding a large black folder in his hands. She hadn't even noticed how fast time had passed. The moment she saw him, her heart started pounding. Faster, stronger, almost uncontrollably. Staring at the black folder in his hands, Eva realized that inside it lay her future, and the fate she was about to choose for herself. Gage told her that he had asked Mr. Park to give him a few more hours, and then he would provide his final answer. The man asked if she'd had enough time to think everything through, or if perhaps she'd changed her mind. When Eva replied that she truly wanted to make a deal with him, Gage looked satisfied. He told her she should first take a look at what he was offering. He handed her the black folder, saying he would give her an entire month to decide whether she would marry him or not. And even if she refused his proposal, he would still accept the position Mr. Park offered him and give her what she had originally wanted. But during that month, there were several conditions, all written down in the contract. Eva needed to review those conditions carefully, as they were mandatory and had to be followed. She tried to read every line with full attention, determined not to miss a single detail. At first, the contract seemed fine, nothing alarming, but she knew she had to keep reading until she reached the section printed in small letters. Maybe it was too early to feel relieved. She hadn't yet reached the part with his main conditions. When she finally got to that section, she paused for a few minutes, trying to calm herself down and prepare for whatever unpleasant surprises might be waiting. The first condition she read completely stunned her. Party A must give Party B one kiss every night. She was already scared to keep reading. The very first clause confused and unsettled her. Gage stood beside her, quietly watching her reaction to what she was reading in the agreement. Eva knew his terms wouldn't be ordinary and tried to brace herself. But still, this man clearly wasn't taking that clause entirely seriously. Her inner voice told her to stop and ask him right away about the parts she didn't understand. Why just one kiss? And when he said only one, what exactly did he mean by that? Gage didn't hesitate to answer. He explained he meant one kiss, nothing more, nothing binding. But it had to happen every night. He smiled, thinking that shouldn't be too hard for her. That's why he made it the first condition. Did he mean that one kiss would be all he wanted? Was he trying to lure her into breaking the deal? Gage didn't feel the need to answer. Everything would depend on her. If she wanted more, it would be her choice. Because he was confident Eva wouldn't be able to resist his charm for long, and that eventually she'd want something more than what was written in the contract. Then she read the consequences for breaking the first clause. If the kiss didn't happen, the punishment would be chosen by the other party, and it wouldn't be discussed in advance. He'd be free to interpret the situation however he liked, and could kiss her as much as he wanted without her consent. She'd have no right to refuse. Reading that, Eva was shocked. Did he really intend to create terms that would make her feel so uncomfortable? Inside, she felt strong resistance. She doubted whether she should sign at all. But on the other hand, she didn't have a choice. Something in her life had to change. The more she read this nonsense, the more she wanted to slap him. These terms felt childish and ridiculous. Eva needed time to calm down, but she didn't have it. Mr. Park was still waiting for Gage's answer. The next clause stated that Party A must not touch Party B during the kiss. The punishment for violating that clause, Party A must grant Party B one wish, completely of Party B's choosing. Gage knew Eva might find these conditions absurd, but he thought they weren't that difficult. It all depended on her principles and determination. The next clause was just as shocking. Party A must warm Party B's bed every night. Eva actually coughed from surprise. She hadn't expected to see that in the agreement. She'd guessed he might ask for something unusual, but she never thought he'd demand this. Wasn't he the one who'd said he had no intention of getting her into bed? Then why the hell was he asking for one kiss and no touching, only to end up with this in the end? Eva lifted her gaze from the document and gave him a suspicious look, as if trying to read his true intentions. Gage understood that look immediately and warned her not to jump to conclusions or imagine things that weren't there. Then he pointed to the bottom of the page, telling her to read the note there first before assuming anything. It said that warming the bed was meant literally, so she shouldn't overthink it. Eva got the point, but still didn't understand why he wanted that. Was he really that lonely? Craving someone's warmth and presence after so long? Holding the paper in her hands, Eva still wanted him to explain each clause. Simple as they seemed, they clearly carried hidden meaning. Gage said everything was already explained clearly. She was smart enough to get it, and he didn't feel like clarifying anything. He didn't have the time or the patience. She would literally have to warm his bed, lie in it until it felt pleasant and comfortable, and she'd have to do that every single night, no matter how tired or unwell she felt. Did that kind of gesture actually satisfy him? Just knowing that before he went to sleep, she had been lying in his bed, making it warm for him? Sure, he was attractive, but deep down, he was crazy. Ava honestly wondered how someone like him even existed. The punishment for breaking that clause was that Party A must allow Party B to perform one intimate thing in bed, though Party A still had the right to refuse. All of it felt bizarre and unsettling to Eva, but looking at Gage, he seemed perfectly fine with it. If she thought carefully, though, by following all the terms, she could actually avoid those punishments altogether. In an addendum to the last clause, it also said that Party A must not touch Party B while performing Clause 2. Clause 4 stated that Party A must live with Party B for the duration of the agreement, return home before dinner every day, and must not have contact with any other men during the month. And for not following the clauses, there were punishments, none of which were in her favor. Of course, she was shocked, but accepting such terms wasn't that hard. Still, to fully understand, she wanted to read the agreement one more time. Finally, this was the last page of the contract, and Eva was surprised that this was it, that these were all the conditions. Gage smiled again. He liked it when Eva got frustrated or didn't quite understand something. But if she wanted more terms added to the contract, he could easily write them in, and after carefully hearing her out, make his own adjustments. Eva quickly replied that there was no need to add or change anything. She wasn't planning to modify this agreement in any way. He told her not to worry. As long as she followed all the terms, there'd be no reason to fear the consequences. Still, the final decision was hers, and she had to make it right now. Gage seemed to know her answer perfectly well, but he wanted to hear it from her directly. Eva hesitated to sign the contract, but Gage kept reminding her that he didn't have much time, so she needed to hurry. He pointed at the clock and told her she had 10 minutes left. She could use that time to think more carefully, or decide to back out before it was too late. She had the right to refuse his offer while she still could, because once she signed her name, there'd be no turning back. Two feelings were battling inside her. Even though her inner voice whispered doubts, Eva kept trying to convince herself she could handle this, and that she wouldn't regret her decision. Still, she found his conditions incredibly strange, and honestly, she had to admit, ridiculously funny. You'd have to be a real idiot to demand a human bed warmer. But maybe he had some kind of emotional trauma. People were all different after all. She shouldn't judge him too harshly. Maybe he was just afraid of using an electric heater, worried it might suddenly catch fire. Or maybe Mr. Acheron could only sleep in a bed warmed by another person's body heat, and that's why he included this in the contract. Maybe that was the case, but what could cause such odd quirks in a man as handsome as him? No one knew. The rich always had their weird habits. Besides, she didn't have time to think about that now. Eva knew this man was insanely suspicious, but he was her only option. Like she'd said before, she was willing to do anything to get revenge on her family. So right now, she believed she was doing the right thing, and no obstacle would stop her from her goal. Ava simply couldn't find a better option than this one, especially with all the nasty rumors already staining her name. If she didn't agree, it would take forever before she could stand back on her feet again. And that's not even counting her revenge. This deal was the fastest and simplest way to reach her goal. As long as Gage kept his word, nothing would be impossible. And Eva was ready to give up everything to get what she wanted. That's why she decided to sign the contract right away, because whenever she started to overthink, doubts would creep in. All that was left was a single step, to sign her name and take a huge leap toward her goal. Just as Eva picked up the pen and prepared to sign, Gage hinted again that she shouldn't rush. He wanted to make sure she truly understood that once she signed, there'd be no way back. It was a hard decision, but Eva had already made up her mind. She was ready to put her signature on that paper. She fully understood what she was doing, so Mr. Acheron had nothing to worry about. Eva had signed countless contracts in her life, none less important than this one. Even though this deal with the devil was pretty simple and straightforward, she didn't need a lawyer to figure out every little clause. Still, Gage felt it was his duty to warn her. And he did. The rest was up to Eva, and all the responsibility was hers alone. It was almost as if he was trying to stop her from making a big mistake. But Eva was determined. She had no intention of backing out. She'd have to live next to him and endure his presence, even when all she'd want was peace and quiet. Eva had to remember, once the contract was signed, there would be no escape. And if she did try to escape, the punishment would be far worse than having to deal with his constant presence. Eva wanted to make it clear that running away wasn't even on her mind. She'd have enough work to keep her busy and ignore the little things. As long as he kept his word, Eva would live by his rules and do her job properly. Gage was pleased with her answer. To him, she seemed like a very obedient, focused girl, someone who always delivered results. Eva decided she'd already spent enough time thinking and talking. It was time to sign, without wasting another minute. She quickly found the signature line and did it, not even thinking that she might soon regret that decision. Finally, with everything settled, they could move forward, carefully following every term of the contract. Gage suggested they start right away by taking off her glasses, the oversized ones that looked way too big for her face. Honestly, she should have gotten rid of those glasses a long time ago. She looked so much prettier without them. But Eva disagreed. She was used to wearing them. They were comfortable for her. Besides, she couldn't see well without them. She just couldn't go without. She didn't understand what was wrong with her glasses anyway. How could they possibly bother him, aside from the fact that he didn't like their design? Gage stepped closer to her and for the first time tried to look her straight in the eyes. Without the glasses, Eva was actually really pretty, though no one had ever noticed it before. Eva stared right back into his eyes without blinking once. It almost felt like he was trying to hypnotize her, but she wasn't about to fall for that. Then he gently put her glasses back on and said that if she felt more comfortable that way, they'd stay as they were. He told her it was time to go. They had to leave right now, so she needed to get ready immediately. After everything that had happened in her life lately, Eva really didn't feel like going anywhere. She tried to convince Gage to change his mind. If they were really going to live together, he should start being kinder and stop calling her pet. It sounded disgusting and humiliating. She had a perfectly normal name, and it sounded nice. From now on, he should use that. Nothing else. Gage agreed. If that's what she wanted, he'd respect it. But maybe he could call her my dear Eva instead? She quickly cut him off. No need to add anything fancy. Just Eva was perfectly fine. He smiled and agreed, though he couldn't help but point out that Dear Eva sounded beautiful, and he really liked saying it. Gage was about to leave, but Eva stopped him. Another small problem had come up. She asked him to wait and listen to her. Things couldn't stay as they were, and it needed to be dealt with right now. He paused, confused why Eva wasn't following his request. They didn't have much time, and they really needed to go. Eva even had to shout at him, loudly to make him stop. She tried to explain that she was wearing pajamas. Did he really expect her to go out in public dressed like this? Gage pointed out that she looked adorable in her pink pajamas and couldn't understand what the problem was. Eva insisted she needed to go home to pick up clothes and other personal things. Stuff she really needed. He told her that wasn't necessary. He could buy her everything new, better than what she had. But then, after thinking it over for a moment, he agreed. He'd let her say goodbye to her home and grab her things. When they arrived at her house, Gage looked around carefully. It wasn't as luxurious as his, of course, but it was neat and cozy enough. As Eva packed her things, Gage quietly watched her. He couldn't understand why all this stuff meant so much to her, why she wanted to take it all with her. To Eva, these were valuable, sentimental things. Sure, he could buy her new ones, but she didn't want to part with what she already loved. She packed one big suitcase and several boxes, so she needed Gage's help carrying them to the car. To her surprise, Gage said he wouldn't even mind if she wanted to move her entire apartment into his place. Eva was shocked. Why the sudden change of heart? Just a while ago, he'd insisted she couldn't bring her things into his house. As they stepped outside and headed toward the car, Eva heard the sound of a camera shutter. Someone had taken their picture. She froze, terrified that reporters had found them and snapped a photo together. By tomorrow, they'd twist the story into a pile of lies that could ruin everything. Panicking, she grabbed Gage's hand and pulled him with her, trying to hide. She kept shouting that they had to run, but judging by his calm face, he didn't seem to think it was urgent. When they finally got back to the apartment, Eva quickly shut the door behind them. There were tons of reporters outside her apartment, all waiting for that one sensational shot of Eva so they could be the first to post fake stories online and in the press. Eva was terrified. That kind of media attention made her anxious, and she knew perfectly well that the reporters could not see her with him. She didn't want Gage's name dragged through the mud or tied to scandal, especially now that he'd just taken such an important position. On top of that, she could become a laughingstock until she proved her innocence and cleared her name completely. Eva suggested that Gage should go without her. She'd stay in the apartment until the reporters left. After all, they wouldn't wait there forever. She didn't want anyone to see her, so she planned to make them believe she'd vanished off the face of the earth. Was Eva really planning to suddenly strike back like some vengeful villain reborn from the ashes? She smiled. Though she didn't really feel like answering his sarcasm, it honestly didn't sound like such a bad idea. She'd only reveal herself to the world when the time came to say checkmate. Gage thought her plan was good, just not completely thought through. For the first time, she fully agreed with him, but the journalist problem still wasn't solved. They needed a new way to get rid of those unwanted guests. She planned to play this game for as long and as cleverly as it took, just like they had played with her life. And if needed, she'd make them believe she was dead. Was Eva really going to lower her relatives' guard? Make them relax, thinking she was finally at peace? Gage realized again how smart she was, and honestly, he liked her devious plan. He suspected this place, maybe even the whole building, belonged to her enemies. After all, they'd even let the reporters come inside. Eva confirmed it. The entire complex belonged to her ex-fiancé's grandparents. That explained a lot. Now, Gage wanted to hear what Eva planned to do, how she intended to slip out of this building without being noticed. He glanced around the apartment, and his eyes stopped on a large wardrobe in the living room. When Eva opened it, all her clothes hung neatly, but they were almost all the same. Gage was surprised and asked if that was really everything she had, and why she owned so few things. Eva had never really thought about it. She figured what she had was enough and never paid much attention to her wardrobe. Gage asked where she kept her dresses, or if she even had any. Didn't she ever want to dress up like other girls? Eva said she did have a few dresses that she loved and wore to almost every event. But those dresses were all pretty much the same too. Her wardrobe looked more like that of a 40-year-old woman than a young girl. At first, Eva didn't understand why he was looking through her clothes, but then it hit her. He was hinting that she should change her look, disguise herself as someone else. She said she could totally pull that off, no problem, then asked him to go wait in another room while she made her grand transformation. Eva pushed Gage out of the room and slammed the door shut. He stood there for a moment. Her sudden confidence really caught him off guard. Gage trusted her creativity, sure, but he still thought this was something he should personally take care of. He immediately pulled out his phone, made a quick call, sent the address, and asked for Eloise to be sent over right away. All he could do now was wait. First for Eva's big reveal, and then for Eloise, who could help perfect her look. Finally, the door opened. Gage looked up eagerly, hoping she'd really surprise him, that he'd see a completely different person standing there. He was curious what this unusual girl had come up with, though judging by her wardrobe, he wasn't expecting much of a transformation. But when he finally saw her, he was genuinely shocked. Her look had completely changed. Though he had to admit it was also a little bit funny. Standing in front of him was Eva, dressed like a teenager. Her hair was hidden under a big hood, and her face was covered with a mask and oversized sunglasses. She honestly believed that with her face completely hidden like that, the reporters still waiting outside her door wouldn't recognize her. Eva confidently headed for the door, not understanding why Gage wasn't coming with her. Did he really plan to just stay in the apartment, waiting for the reporters to get tired and leave on their own? But that wasn't what Gage had in mind. The moment they saw someone dressed like that, the reporters would immediately suspect something. He was sure they'd swarm her like vultures. Maybe she could fool ordinary people, but not professionals who saw disguises like this almost every day. Anything strange always caught journalists' attention. People trying to hide always stood out, exactly because they tried too hard to blend in. Eva thought they could take as many pictures as they wanted. Who cared as long as her face wasn't visible in any of them? Had she forgotten that the reporters were crowded tightly by the exit? They could pounce on her like hawks, maybe even rip off her hood or mask. Never underestimate that pack of wild dogs, ready to tear each other apart just to get a breaking shot and some extra publicity. He couldn't allow her to be manhandled like that. Still, she'd have to leave first. They couldn't be seen together. If he was going to protect her from scandal, that was the least he could do. She just needed to trust him and follow his lead. Eva had to listen carefully. He couldn't just leave her here alone. They had to think fast and act smart. But Eva didn't want to listen. She wanted to stick to her own plan. Convinced her disguise was perfect and that no one would suspect a thing. Gage quickly cut off her emotional protest, telling her to lower her voice. Someone could be listening. He wanted her to let him handle it, to show her the best way out of the mess they'd stumbled into. Then, right outside her apartment door, she appeared. A stylish, elegant woman with huge branded shopping bags in her hands. Gage immediately introduced her to Eva. Her name was Eloise, and she was the best makeup artist and stylist in the entire district. Eloise was warm and friendly. She greeted Eva right away, genuinely happy to meet her. Though surprised to see a stylist and makeup artist in her apartment, Eva greeted her back, though she still thought she didn't need any help. Eva glanced at Gage, her eyes silently asking why he'd called a stylist without even consulting her. Gage assured her there was nothing to worry about. Eloise would take good care of everything, and he was certain Eva would like the result. Eloise worked fast. Within minutes, Eva's makeup was done. All that was left was to change her dress and shoes. Gage was pleased with how everything looked so far so Eloise could go. He thanked her for the great job. She'd handled everything perfectly and quickly. Eloise was confident Eva could handle the rest, the dress, on her own. So she quickly left the apartment. Eva had been in the other room for quite a while and still hadn't come out. Gage waited impatiently, but Eva didn't seem in a hurry to show off her new look. Maybe she was having trouble or needed help. He figured he should at least offer. He decided to knock on her door and ask if everything was okay. "You've been changing for way too long," he said. "If you're having trouble, I can help." From behind the door, she answered with clear frustration. She didn't like the dress. She said it looked too strange for her taste. Gage didn't wait for permission. He opened the door and stepped inside to see for himself. The moment he saw her, he froze, pleasantly surprised. Eva looked completely different. It was like seeing a new person. He stood across from her, speechless. She was so beautiful that he couldn't take his eyes off her. He didn't understand why she looked so displeased. She was absolutely stunning. But Eva felt uncomfortable in that outfit and wanted to change back. She couldn't hide her irritation. When she said she had to change, Gage immediately stopped her. She wanted to hide from the reporters, right? Well, this look was perfect for that. Even he hadn't recognized her at first. Taking her hand, he led her to the mirror, telling her to really look at herself, to see that she looked incredible. "This," he said, "is how you disappear while staying right in plain sight." It had to work. No one had ever seen her like this. Everyone was used to the serious, plain office mouse version of Eva. To finish the look, Gage suggested adding a pair of oversized sunglasses. They made her seem even more elegant and refined. In that disguise, Eva could walk right out of her apartment, and he was sure not a single person would recognize her. So Eva looked at her reflection. She could hardly believe it was her. She looked like a real, elegant lady. Gage offered her his arm, and together they prepared to leave the apartment, ready to walk past the reporters without raising a single eyebrow. "Are you ready?" he asked. "Walk straight and confident. Chin up, shoulders back. And if you look at the reporters, see them like they're just random people on the street. Or better yet," he added, "imagine they're pathetic little bugs crawling around your feet." Right now, Eva felt like that would actually be easy. She was barely afraid anymore. Still, as they walked side by side, Eva was nervous she might trip, so she held tightly onto Gage's arm. She didn't usually wear heels, and today they were very high, the highest she'd ever worn in her life. Gage reassured her that she had nothing to worry about. He was right beside her and wouldn't let her stumble or fall. Even though Eva was trembling with fear inside, she didn't show it. She walked confidently next to him, trusting him completely. There were so many things she wanted to say, but she chose to stay silent, afraid her words might later be twisted by the press. She couldn't stop thinking about how nervous she was. What would happen if they caught and recognized her? She had to stop overthinking. First, she needed to relax, to believe that nothing bad was going to happen. Her inner voice teased her. Was the crown squeezing her head too tight? She'd never felt this confident about her appearance before. Maybe it was because of the man she was holding on to so tightly, the one whose hand she refused to let go of. It really was because of him. He had that kind of presence, something magnetic. It didn't matter what he said or did. His very aura drew people in. Eva could tell that Gage was the kind of man who could make a crowd part with just a single glance. So being beside him made her feel completely safe, like nothing could touch her as long as he was there. As they passed through the press, Eva felt her heart racing. She could sense all those eyes on her, journalists staring, desperate to catch even the smallest clue. But she kept her chin high, pretending none of it bothered her at all. Her charm was mesmerizing. People couldn't look away or even think clearly while she was near. The reporters studied them carefully, trying to figure out who they were. For a moment, they even forgot why they had come to this building in the first place. Eva walked confidently, knowing she just had to hold it together for a few more minutes. And then it would all be over. They'd almost made it through the crowd. Ahead of them was a long hallway, and at the very end, the elevator. That was their goal. When they reached it, Gage was supposed to hit the button, but for some reason, he hesitated. Time seemed to slow down. Eva started to panic, and Gage could tell, so he gently pulled her close, hoping to calm her down. Finally, the elevator arrived. They quickly stepped inside. It was done. It seemed like they had pulled it off. The reporters hadn't recognized her. But even as the doors began to close, the journalists kept staring, their eyes locked on the mysterious pair. Once the doors shut, the reporters started arguing among themselves, trying to figure out who those people were. None of them could recall any celebrities living in that building, though the man did look oddly familiar. As for the woman, they couldn't quite place her either, but she definitely looked like a model. Or maybe an actress. She was stunning, and her very presence drew admiration. The reporters assumed they must be famous. But if they were famous, why couldn't anyone remember their names? Surely someone should have recognized them. One of the reporters asked if anyone had managed to snap a photo. Maybe they could zoom in later and figure out who they were. But everyone had been so captivated by the couple that not a single person had thought to take a picture. It was embarrassingly unprofessional. The journalists were frustrated. Could it really be that no one got a single shot? Still, the pair had appeared and vanished so suddenly, so gracefully. There was no point regretting it now. One of them reminded the group to stay focused on their original task. He pulled up a photo of Eva on his phone, immediately noticing her bright red hair. He studied the picture carefully, comparing it to the elegant woman who had just walked by him moments ago. But the girl in the photo looked plain, completely ordinary. There was no way anyone could believe she and that graceful lady were the same person. Ava and Gage were already in the elevator, so there was no point in anyone chasing them. It seemed like they'd managed to slip past the press without raising any suspicion. Ava finally managed to relax a little and let go of Gage's hand, which she'd been gripping so tightly. Gage pointed out that the simplest way to hide was not to hide at all. Somehow that always worked. He asked how she was feeling now and whether she enjoyed being part of such a risky little adventure. Ava still couldn't believe that not a single reporter had even started to suspect it was them. Finally, they reached the car and could safely head to Gage's house. Gage told Eva that he'd be starting work at his new position in 3 days, so she still had some time to perfect her disguise. Eva didn't get why she needed to perfect anything. After all, she would be doing the work for him without ever appearing in public. From now on, she'd be known as Evelyn Lee, his smartest, most alluring, and most seductive personal secretary and assistant. Ava didn't want to talk on the way to the estate. She wanted Gage to focus on driving safely. His decision to make her his secretary and personal assistant threw her off. She had her own ideas about working at a competitor's company. After a moment's thought, she agreed, knowing it was the perfect setup for her to handle the work efficiently on his behalf. And of course, she'd always need to be by Gage's side. To avoid unnecessary steps, she needed to see and hear everything firsthand. She'd have the chance to monitor him closely and guide him whenever he really needed help. This wasn't just about protecting him from scandal. It was also to prevent the kind of fall that had happened to her. Everything Eva suggested worked for Gage. They managed to reach an agreement quickly without causing each other extra problems. Still, there were a few points that needed more discussion, so they decided to cover them once they got home. Ava didn't understand why there was anything left to discuss. Everything seemed clear and already agreed upon. As they drove past the company where Ava used to work, it was obvious she was angry and irritated. Gage noticed and jokingly asked if she was secretly planning the perfect way to burn the whole building to the ground. Ava shot him a serious look and replied confidently that, yes, that was exactly what she wanted. To burn it to ashes and forget it all like a nightmare. Gage noted that she spoke like a character out of a novel about vengeful thieves, always craving revenge. Ava wondered who was really to blame. Her family had shaped her into this person, even if they hadn't meant to. That's why she wouldn't disappoint her dear relatives. The way they made her. That's the way she'd remain for them. Gage could sense the immense anger she held toward her family, and her firm determination to get revenge for everything they'd done. But Eva noticed that Gage himself looked unusually tense, as if something had him on edge. Yet all it took was a glance at his charming smile, and she caught herself thinking she wanted to devour him. Then she realized she was overthinking. Most likely, he was just enjoying watching the little drama unfold. Her inner voice called her thoughts silly. Really, did she actually think this devilishly handsome man was smiling because he was a big fan of the drama? Who knew? She didn't want to think about that right now. She figured Gage's mind was impossible to read. She was bursting with the desire to start preparing for her work at the competitor's company, to take steps that would make them all regret underestimating her. But she knew she had to wait just a little longer. Ava and Gage had already arrived at the huge estate. Here, she felt safe, so she could finally relax a little. Unexpectedly, Gage announced that he would be leaving on business and wouldn't return for 3 days. Ava was surprised. He had never even mentioned the possibility of being away for a few days, leaving her alone in such a massive house. Since they were working together, Eva decided she had the right to know exactly where he was going. At first, he didn't want to answer. It was his personal business. But he ultimately decided to be honest and explain what he'd be handling. He was a healthy man in his prime and unmarried to boot. So he had just 3 days before diving headfirst into all this work nonsense. When Gage said he might take a short walk while he could, Ava didn't like it. She felt he shouldn't be doing that. He immediately smiled and even coughed a little, surprised by Eva's reaction to his words. It felt strange to him because she was acting as if she were his wife. Of course, it stung that she hadn't yet decided about his proposal, but he hoped she would make the right choice. Right now was her chance. If she wanted to say something, she could. He was listening carefully. After all, Gage was the kind of guy who would really follow his wife's orders and hardly ever argue with her. Eva's inner voice screamed that this couldn't be real. It was like something out of a fantasy. She said he misunderstood her. She was referring to the part of the contract stating she had to kiss him every night and warm his bed. If he left for a few days, how could she fulfill the contract's conditions? Would that count as a violation? With consequences in the form of punishment? Again, she was saying one thing while thinking another, pretending not to have heard his last remark so she wouldn't have to act on it. Eva tried to ignore her inner voice because she didn't know how to react, while he seemed to be teasing her, which she clearly understood. It wasn't hard for him to explain. He said it was just a whim, so no penalties would apply to her. Besides, she hadn't said anything when signing the contract. She could have added punishments for him too, as contract clauses. He had responsibilities as well, and for not spending the night with her, he could be punished, even if he was away on business. Eva didn't understand why he was bringing this up now. Had Gage forgotten the contract was already signed with no changes allowed? These discussions made no sense. Their signatures were already there. But she couldn't let him leave now. She knew she couldn't give orders. She wasn't his fiancé or even his girlfriend. She couldn't allow anything to interfere with her plan for revenge on the Young family. Not even him. If he got caught up in a scandal and ruined his reputation, all her plans would collapse before they even started. And if they started dating, would he continue seeing other women and openly tell her about it? He was surprised. He couldn't believe such thoughts were running through her mind. She hadn't even agreed to marry him yet, and she was already worrying about having to share him with someone else. Did she really think he was the type of man who would play around with other women while having a lover? She knew modern men loved cheating. They were never satisfied with just one woman and craved variety. Everyone knows the richer a man is. The thicker his wallet, the more admirers he has wanting to take advantage of him. And she assumed Mr. Gage Acheron was that type of man. Maybe that's why he was still unmarried, but liked to stroll through nightclubs. Eva had seen too many men who treated cheating as normal. Even her ex-fiancé, who for money would do anything just to avoid working. That jerk had probably cheated on her back in college, and she never even suspected it. Gage didn't want Eva to think that about him. It bothered him. He wanted to show her tenderness, so he gently touched her cheek. She didn't need to worry. He would definitely return, wouldn't do anything shameful, and he could even promise that. Interesting. How did he know she was worried about that? Could he really read her like an open book? If he broke his promise, she'd make sure to punish him, regardless of what the contract said. He didn't mind and quickly agreed. He liked that Eva cared and was worried about him. Eva was completely serious. She didn't want him to think she was joking just to lighten the mood. He understood everything but wanted her to know he never proposes to date girls casually. Free relationships didn't interest him. He was determined. Right now, he was only interested in marriage, not wasting time on trivialities. So if she wanted full control over him, there was just one small thing she needed to do, and everything she wanted could come true. Nothing special or complicated. All it took was agreeing to be his wife, and he would belong entirely to her. Eva didn't know what to say. Was he really serious? Why was he so insistent on her becoming his wife, without even letting them just date? But there was no rush. He agreed to give her a full month to think everything through carefully and without pressure. Maybe she had already realized that he liked her right away. He just first saw her at the nightclub. Gage also caught Eva's attention, but she was wary because sometimes he acted strangely, even frightening her with his unpredictability. Since they were both here and evening was falling, Gage suggested that she fulfill the terms of their agreement. She could kiss him before he left. And that would be the first step towards seeing if she really liked him. Giving her time to think it over, Gage noticed Eva starting to get nervous, but she tried to hide it. She seemed uncomfortable and uneasy. Any beginner would be nervous, and she was no exception. She couldn't understand why Mr. Acheron seemed so surprised, like this was something incredible. If everything was fine, why wasn't she doing anything to fulfill her duty and move the process forward? No need to rush. Did she really want to imply that she'd never kissed anyone or been close to a man before? Of course not. She was an adult woman who'd had long-term relationships and even an ex-fiancé she lived with for a while. She was just saying she'd never been the initiator. That's why it felt unusual for her to start things on her own without any hints from him. It felt foreign and didn't trigger any natural feelings. No need for further explanation. Gage understood perfectly. The situation wasn't standard, so anything was possible. And for the first time, he could help her relax and carry out this part of the agreement without any discomfort. She didn't need to worry. Just trust him and let go. There was nothing scary about not getting it right the first time. Today was an unusual day, so he allowed her to practice on him and not stress about the result at all. Eva couldn't help herself. Hearing his seductive voice made it impossible not to want to pounce on him. But with a stern look, she told him she didn't need practice at all. And Mr. Acheron was wrong in his assumption. There was no time to hesitate, so Eva braved touching him first, turning toward him. At first, she just wanted to look into his big eyes. She tried to move closer, but it looked awkward and she couldn't manage it. She even started getting frustrated. The rules said she couldn't touch him during the kiss, so she quickly tried to take his hand. Yet, as she leaned in, her hand ended up on his neck again. She just didn't know how else to do it. Gage noticed how bold she was. Her strong character wouldn't let her give up or back down. Touching him, Eva finally went for the kiss, hoping he wouldn't push her away. As promised, Gage tried to help her, but he quickly realized her determination didn't need any support. Eva kissed him quickly, but broke the rule. She touched his body during the kiss. Gage loved it, and he wanted to kiss her again, explaining that the first kiss was just practice, and now they needed to do it properly. Eva knew she needed to keep her distance and wanted to step back, but he held her tightly, pressing her against him. Gage noticed that Eva didn't even resist, which meant she enjoyed being in his arms, so he didn't rush to let go. But he moved carefully, not wanting to scare her with his insistence. Eva finally exhaled after fulfilling her duty. She couldn't even speak. Her feelings were strange, almost unfamiliar. He tried joking, saying it was more like a punch. Only instead of fists, Eva used her gentle lips. Eva didn't like that joke. Could he really dare to criticize her, knowing exactly what position she was in? Besides, he hadn't clarified which kind of kiss she was supposed to give him. Did he forget or just not think it through beforehand? He completely agreed with her, as always thinking she was right. Even if he wanted to argue, he had neither the strength nor the time. It was getting dark, and he needed to leave. But he didn't want to leave Eva alone in his huge, almost empty house. He stepped out of this car to open the door for Eva, who would be staying home. She reluctantly got out of the car, showing with every movement that she didn't want Gage to leave her alone. He felt it was his duty to tell Eva that this kiss had been unforgettable for him and that he would eagerly look forward to repeating it the next evening. But he decided it was best to wait a little, so as not to create tension between them. It was time to hit the road, yet Gage realized he wanted more than ever to stay home. Why did he feel so mysterious and possessive now? Maybe it was because the playful smile wasn't on his face this time. Gage suggested Eva spend these 3 days perfecting her disguise. Time would fly, and she wouldn't even notice how quickly he'd return. Everything was already prepared, so she just needed to focus on honing her skills. Eva didn't see any problems with that and fully agreed with his advice. She needed to get used to her new image and lifestyle. If they'd taken care of everything and fulfilled their duties, he could leave without worrying about her. She'd be responsible and eagerly await his return. She also needed to make sure she learned all his responsibilities related to the new job at the company. Gage hugged Eva again and whispered in her ear not to be sad. They'd see each other in 3 days. Eva stood by the car, watching Gage leave reluctantly. He looked back at her. reminded once more of how much he liked her, which made his desire to marry her even stronger. He got in the car and drove off for his errands, leaving Eva standing in the middle of the driveway of the Devil's huge estate. She felt lonely, but she had time to rethink everything and set her plans on the right path. Eva touched her lips, still feeling the memory of his kiss on them. When she signed the contract and agreed to all the terms, she never imagined she'd actually like them and want to repeat them every night. Eva was so lost in thought she didn't notice the butler approaching, calling her name for some time already. The butler and a few maids came out to escort Eva to the house and help her settle in. Mr. Clark had worked as the butler in this house for a long time, serving Mr. Acheron faithfully. Eva immediately decided to ask if Mr. Clark could tell her the story of the maid who had run away from this house. Mr. Clark didn't understand which runaway she meant. And really, why did she need to know what happened in this house long before she arrived? While Gage was away, Eva worked a lot and didn't even notice that 3 days had already flown by. While Gage was away, Eva worked a lot and didn't even notice that 3 days had already flown by. Sitting in the chair, Eva watched the clock, and by the time it was clear he should have already returned. That was right. Eva had been completely caught up in work and him these past 3 days and didn't even get a chance to rest. She was really annoyed. Couldn't he even have had the decency to call her or at least send a message? This little devil had suddenly appeared in her life and just as suddenly disappeared, without contacting her even once. Wasn't he curious whether she was managing everything and how life in his house was for her? And she didn't want to be compared to him. They were completely different, and it was rare that their thoughts aligned. If he didn't show up by evening, Eva planned to call Mr. Park and, if needed, find this rascal herself and drag him home. The hour was late. When the clock struck midnight, a rustle came from the front door. He carefully opened the front door, knowing Eva might be resting at that hour and not wanting to scare her. The house was quiet, so Gage didn't expect Eva to greet him. When he entered the living room, he was surprised to see Eva sitting in the chair, seemingly waiting for him. As Gage approached, he noticed she was fast asleep but still had the laptop on her lap. Had she really been working until she was so exhausted she couldn't even make it to bed? Gage realized she had fallen asleep waiting for him. It was the first time in his life someone had waited or maybe even worried about him. Eva didn't hear anything because she was sleeping deeply. In those pajamas, she looked incredible, cozy and homey. In life, she was like a fierce tigress protecting herself from all troubles. But asleep, she was like a sweet little kitten craving warmth and tenderness. Gage smiled. She had grown even more beautiful these past days. Now he could stand beside her and look at her without causing any discomfort. He thought he should carefully remove her glasses since she could break them or even hurt her face while sleeping. But then he quickly withdrew his hand, worried he might wake her. He decided to compose himself first, and then they'd go to bed together. While he was gone, Eva could catch a little more sleep in the chair by the warm fire. Later, she'd have to warm his bed with her body before he went to sleep. Gage left, and Eva stayed sleeping in the chair. She didn't even stir, completely exhausted and deep asleep. He decided to take a shower, starting by stripping off all his clothes. The trip had been tough on him, too. He was tired and thought a warm shower would help him relax and feel relief. His body was covered in blood, bruises, and scratches, so the warm water hurt and felt unpleasant. He needed to clean up because he couldn't appear before Eva like that. She might get scared, and he didn't want to answer her questions about what had happened. After the shower, Gage lay in bed, and beside him was Eva. His face looked perfect and handsome again, with that same smile lingering. When Eva opened her eyes, she noticed Gage lying next to her. She hadn't even heard him arrive, nor remembered how she ended up in bed beside him. He wished her good morning, but Eva jumped up quickly, realizing they had overslept. She checked the clock and leaped out of bed, shouting that they were terribly late and needed to wake up fast. Gage lay calmly in bed, asking Eva to relax. After all, he was the owner. She didn't need to rush. She remembered how a prince used to wake Sleeping Beauty. He thought the same tactic would work on him, so he suggested Eva try it. Eva was confused. She couldn't understand what was really wrong with this guy, and why he was always so calm, like nothing ever bothered him. To calm her down, Gage hugged her tightly, pressing her to him. It seemed only a kiss could balance her and let her understand everything was okay. That kiss was a true rescue for both of them, much better than the first one in the car. Surprisingly, it worked, and Eva calmed down quickly. She finally realized Gage had returned. She had waited for him. Still, she insisted Mr. Acheron get up. She wouldn't test her patience. She even swore she could make him regret it. Her request couldn't be ignored. She alone knew the right way to handle their work, and he had to follow her instructions. The man joked, saying he'd get out of bed only if she agreed to do something immediately. He really wanted one more kiss in their collection before starting work. Eva didn't listen. She grabbed his hand and pulled him along quickly. Maybe next time he'd stay in bed and see what she'd do if he didn't help. Eva was furious, begging him to stop fooling around and quickly get himself together and dressed. Then she threatened that if they were late today, he'd regret it. And he had no idea what this sweet little kitten was capable of when annoyed. Eva and Gage were all set and driving in their luxury car to the office. It was their first day at work, so they had a lot to do. At first, Eva rode in silence, but she did have one question for Mr. Acheron that she hadn't dared to ask yet. Gathering her courage, she finally asked why he had slept in her bed beside her, wanting a truthful answer. No jokes or excuses. And the usual story about her not warming his bed with her body wouldn't work today, so she expected something original from him. As far as she knew, he had come home very late the previous night, and she couldn't imagine that he'd climb into her bed without her permission. According to their contract, if any violation was his fault, she bore no responsibility, and no punishment could be applied. Besides, he had the audacity to lie in her bed. She didn't care about the reason. It only mattered that he did it without her consent. Gage understood all of Eva's grievances, and if she wanted, they could discuss it right now. He had to explain why he had gotten into her bed. The reason was simple. His own bed was too cold, not because he had some hidden motives. Eva thought it would have been better if this sly wolf just said yes, and she would have been satisfied, but she still wanted to tease him a little and act offended. Gage couldn't even imagine what hidden motives she was talking about. Did she really think he'd tried to take advantage of her state to satisfy his male needs? Still, he decided to clarify. Maybe she could give some concrete examples to help him understand the whole picture of what might have happened. Eva was irritated, telling him not to mock her. He knew perfectly well what she meant. He wanted her to relax. This wasn't a business conversation, so there were no consequences to worry about. He was completely right. It was far more serious than they had imagined. Gage didn't want to argue, so he decided to agree with everything Eva said. Today, he'd raise the white flag and let her win. She was completely right. He had done it because his bed was cold, and for one other reason he didn't want to talk about. Eva wanted him to finish his explanation, but Gage wasn't sure if she really wanted to hear it. She wanted everything clarified before they got to the office, so she prepared to listen carefully. He agreed mainly because Eva was very persistent. She didn't want him to leave. When he returned, he found her asleep in the chair with her laptop. He decided to be the perfect gentleman and carried her to her room. He planned to leave after putting her to bed, but Eva clung to him and refused to let go. It was already too late, and he didn't want to wake her, so he let her hold on to him almost the entire night. Eva guessed that this rascal had probably made up this story without blinking, but when he teased her, there was always a spark in his eyes. Now it was gone. Could it all be true? Had he really told everything exactly as it happened? She couldn't believe it, and she didn't understand why she wanted to keep him close. That night, she looked adorable to him, like a little fluffy kitten. So he decided to be quiet and obedient, knowing that if he woke this kitten, she could turn into a fierce tigress. If that happened, the tigress could devour him alive without even chewing. So he decided not to risk it and submitted to her will. They needed to end the conversation as they were almost at the office. They decided to leave the topic behind and never revisit it. The car stopped in front of the office building. On her first day, Eva was a little nervous, but Gage was there, calm and composed. Today, Eva wore a beautiful white business dress, and beside her stood the handsome Mr. Acheron in a sharp suit, looking every bit like a high-ranking executive. Eva was about to head into the office when she noticed that he wasn't moving. He wasn't in a hurry. That expression suited her perfectly, Gage noted, addressing Miss Lee. Eva smiled and thanked Gage for the compliment. That's exactly what she wanted to hear from him before starting work. As the stylish pair walked toward the office entrance, employees greeted them, wishing them well on their first day. For Eva and Gage, a new life filled with exciting adventures was just beginning. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this review, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this story and what manhwa you'd like to see next. See you in the next installment.